He was gonna be on here as well. Is he on? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, great.
Ken
I
Baldwin is
see.
on.
I am here.
Oh, terrific, Ken. Okay, then we can get started. We have the important people here.
It's next to Ken up there is Shiva. He's the RF engineer for Verizon.
Oh, excellent. You said you were gonna try and get him. Excellent. Well, why don't we get the meeting going? You wanna call the
Secretary will
roll?
call the roll.
Hiram Cantu. Michael Collins,
We know he's not here. Yeah.
Bernard Clark, I'm just reading it
Right.
already. Sven England,
Here.
Jill Gazzetti here, Janie Hunter.
Janae Hunter has
Sorry.
started.
I knew it as soon as
Everyone
I
does,
said
but I
it.
just thought it's thrown off that way.
As
Thank
soon
you.
as it came out.
All good.
Krista Kennan.
Yeah.
Is it, and do I say it right, Karim? Karim?
Kareem,
Kareem.
like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Oh,
Excellent.
You'll know that. That rings the bell.
No,
I like to say that.
now I won't forget. And Rich Townsend.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a quorum?
We have a quorum?
Okay, we have a quorum. Terrific. Why don't we do the minutes first? And I know there's a couple changes on the minutes, I believe. In the section called ratification election of officers, it says Chairman Townsend read the record, and that should be Vice Chairman Sven England. And that same change goes down in the adoption of schedule of meeting dates. Okay. And then the paragraph that says organizational matters, I don't think that belongs. I think that was the prior meeting.
That's it. Okay, yep.
Okay, we got you in there twice, Kevin. We didn't think you needed to be in twice. Right. So those are changes I had. Does anyone else have any changes?
No,
Okay, can I get a motion?
Not appearing. I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye,
Aye.
unanimous? Terrific. Okay, for the first thing on the agenda is, as it always is, public comment. Do we have any of the public? We don't have them in the room. Is there anyone? Rick, do you want to say anything?
No, thank you, Rich.
Okey doke. So we don't have any public comments tonight. And the next section was cell tower coverage strategy discussion. And luckily, we have Ray here. Ray, and I'll get your name wrong.
Right, Brigatti.
Ray Vergati. And we have Ken Baldwin here as well. And of course, the RF engineer from Verizon. And your name is?
Hi, this is Shiva Gadasan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Kevin?
Yeah, the minutes actually reflect Ken as being counsel to the town. He's counsel to Verizon.
Verizon.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
The agenda.
Yep. So if we could do that, do you want to move up to the table
I
here?
had a quick question too on the
Sure.
agenda. It says the current cellular network design is Homeland Towers. What does that mean? Are there,
Well, we'll let him explain it.
because they're not currently designing.
No, they designed it and they presented it, actually. It was a formal presentation that took place, I think, in,
Yeah, I saw that. I'm just saying, but right now, I
no,
just
this
was
isn't a
confused.
presentation of the network. Right? We've all had the opportunity to take a look at what they presented back then. And then why don't you just go through the
Sure.
timeline here, if you would?
Just for introduction purposes, I'm Ray Vergati. A number of you may know me, have seen me, heard the name, obviously. I'm the regional manager for Homeland Towers. On a personal note, I'm a resident of Connecticut, born and bred in the state. On the business side, I've been doing tower development work for the better of 23 years. Homeland Towers is out of Danbury, Connecticut. We are simply a tower builder. We build the infrastructure for the carriers such as the Verizons, the AT&Ts, the T-Mobiles of the world, the Dishes of the world. We provide the critical infrastructure. We started down this venture with the town a long time ago. I have a lot of experience in New Canaan. I personally did the tower at Silver Hill Hospital, and that was a while back. There's a lot of history with the carriers here in town, and don't need to go into so much in the past, but there's always been interest. New Canaan being a very influential community, It's always been a tough area for the carriers, and to be quite frank, they've given up on towns like New Canaan. We, as a developer, have a different approach. When the need is there, we put our nose down, we don't go away. We don't operate on annual budgets like the carriers. So Homeland's exposure with the town goes back to pretty much 2016 and a little before that, when First Selectman Mr. Malazzi was present. But there was an RFP that the town put out, and Homeland was the bidder, the winner of that RFP, and that was in 2016. We're coming up on 2024. You can do the math.
Yeah, exactly.
So we had a lot of history in trying to work with the town over the better of 7-8 years on town-owned properties, specifically Irwin Park and West School. During the infant process of that, we heard the message from the town. It was we really want to solve the coverage issues in the Northeast and the Northwest sections of New Canaan. And that was important to the town. And as a matter of fact, you folks had completed a study back in 2012, an online survey in various parts. And those were the two areas identified that were just completely lacking in service, the Northeast and the Northwest. And you can look at that survey, and there's all certain statistics and numbers, but basically 90% of the people here, residents, felt it's just inadequate, and compared it to, being worse in a third world country. So we took the town's advice and said, we'll stay away from the town property, and we will work in the Northeast and the Northwest sections. And we kept good on our word. We were the company that built the tower at 183 Soundview Lane. It's a 90-foot pine tree, stealth tree. Not an easy lift, people always want to have opinions and opposition. But at the end of the day, it was a great location, the right location. And I challenge anybody to drive up to Soundview and take a look at it. We're very proud of how that tower came out. We then focused our efforts on the northwest side of town, and we secured a lease at 1837 Ponus Ridge. We went through the process, which is a siting council, and I'm happy to explain that process to any new members of the board here or the commission. But it's all through the state agency. Obviously, the siting council approves or denies these applications through a docket system. The siting council approved our application in December of 2022. We are in the midst of getting the final approval and doing the finishing touches. We're hopeful to start construction in the fall of this year. So we have come back to the West School, and I'm not here to get into the weeds tonight on any details. I really want to keep this lighthearted and answer any questions that you folks may have. But certainly the focus on our point is to now figure out a solution, because we're serious in trying to solve that coverage gap. We understand the need. The carriers have the need, not Homeland Towers. I'm not here before the council stating our need. The carriers have a need. They drive the network. They dictate where they need to be. In this particular case, Verizon Wireless is the anchor or the lead tenant for us. They've expressed a strong interest. As a matter of fact, they tried to get on the water tank up there.
It seems that the video is not working,
Um,
the video link.
you think? They're moving.
Moving.
External link.
Oh,
Yeah. So should be,
But
People
I-
can't watch the meeting.
yeah, they cannot.
Someone is not
Yeah, people are unable to see it from home.
right because there's a different meeting ID and passcode.
Right.
You give me their contact information, or you can,
Sure.
they can get them in.
Well, so they have.
Yeah, let me-
People may be trying to get
let me,
it.
let me just explain for a minute. I think got the wrong link on. Okay, so anybody getting on the link is gonna not get to us tonight. Okay, and now if they get upset enough and call, we can get them the link, or if they get to any of you folks, we can obviously get the link. If we get their email to Bob, he'll get them the link.
Yeah.
I have no idea how it happened because Pam got it to me. I copied it into the stuff we sent to you.
And
but
the meeting
that's-
is still being recorded.
The meeting's being
So people
recorded.
view it.
The meeting's being recorded, and the Zoom is obviously working since the Zoom folks.
They just
are-
can't make comments if they wanted to do public comments.
The
I
public
guess is
comments
the-
over now.
I know they
Yeah.
couldn't, they
But,
couldn't do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
We took care of that, didn't we? By accident. We'll get the start of the meeting correct here in a minute, or in maybe a couple more sessions. So.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
Yeah.
not a problem whatsoever. So going back to the history of Verizon's interest on the west side, both Verizon and AT&T had attempted to work with Aquarian Water Company because there's an existing water tank up there on the property, and Aquarian was not having it, and it really is very low in height. I think it's about 55 feet. Did not work for the carriers. It was vetted very strongly back in 2010, 2011 timeframe. So Verizon is the anchor that's driving this project with Homeland Towers right now. AT&T has also written a letter to First Selectman Moynihan back in November, expressing their interest to co-locate on this site if it were to be approved. I'm happy to talk about any details of the property. I mean, certainly we feel, I know it's got the stigma attached as an elementary school.
Mhm.
I just want the commission members to understand that this is not something that is unheard of or unprecedented. We have built towers on school properties before. They do exist. I did one in Easton at the Staples Elementary School. I provided lists to prior town council members, board of selectmen members, UC members when it was intact years ago, of a list of just sites in Connecticut that are next to schools, and people kind of raise their eyebrows when they realize. And this is nothing new to New Canaan. As a matter of fact, you know, you have the Waveney Park water tank, which in all purposes is a cell tower. It's a 130-foot cell tower. Everyone is on there, including public safety. And then you have the high school that is immediately next door, and playing fields below. You have St. Luke's School 250 feet away from a tower I did on Soundview Lane. So I just want to drive or reinforce the fact that, you know, when people say this is a tower at the West Elementary School, yes, the school is on a 47.47 acre parcel. We started off at 500 feet away. We were asked to go further. We went to 700. We went to 900. We've given two other options at, I think, 13 and 1400 feet away. We provided health and safety reports. 900 feet is quite a distance, and I'll never change people's opinions or feelings. I get it. But we're here to, we have a job to do, and I'm here to solve a coverage problem, not only for the residents, but to help out the first responders who rely on this infrastructure. And let's face it, this is critical infrastructure, just like sewer, water, electricity. Cellular has become extremely important. These are life-saving structures, as I like to put it. I can't make everybody happy. I do my best. But what I can tell you is that because the way this particular property in the terrain, we've had a view shed completed, and in a 2-mile study area, 1 acre is visible, cumulative 1 acre. So it doesn't get much better than that as far as screening goes. But again, I'm biased because I'm the developer here, obviously, and I've got a job to do, or trying to attempt, obviously. And I will tell you that we don't think there's any better parcel here in town.
Okay.
And we're all ears if somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, look at my property. We think it's a good location. And the beauty part about it is that the town has the opportunity, if you want it on town property, you get to control it. If I'm on private property, I do not go to your inland wetlands. I do not go to your planning board. I do not go to your ZBA. I do not go to your town council. I do not go to utilities commission. I go straight to siting council if I'm on private property. And we've done that before. We usually give towns a first crack at it. The town gets to control the process, the aesthetics, the zoning. They also receive the financial benefit of it, of a lease that they receive, the monthly income. So I think it's an opportunity before the town. I challenge anyone to come out and say, this is a better location. I think my goal is, there's been talk about conducting a third-party drive test. Because I say we, Shiva, the Verizon RF engineer, has provided coverage plots showing there's a gap, Frogtown, Llewellyn, all the streets down below and so forth. And some people don't believe it, which is fine. So I know there's been discussion and talk since November of last year with the Board of Selectmen of get a third party in here. And let's do it before the leaves come off the trees. So you have a true gauge of what a signal would be like propagating from this location here, or propagating from the tower at 1837 Ponus Ridge. Because right now that tower is not under construction. It probably won't be on air for another 6 or 7 months. So what it entails with a drive test for you folks who may not be familiar is a crane would come out to the property. You lift an antenna up and a company drives the area roads, real time, real signal, and they evaluate how that signal is propagating from that particular antenna. Because I've been told, or people believe, that just because a tower would be going in on the New Canaan Northwest side, it's going to alleviate the issue down here on the west side. And that is not true. And the coverage plots that Verizon has provided state that. But I understand people don't always trust a tower developer or trust a carrier, and I get it. So my recommendation or advice, because it's being talked about quite a bit, is to engage a third party directly through an RFP, however you want to do it, and get a drive test going.
I would like to go back a minute.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I thought we skipped 20 steps ahead. I thought the goal of this, we were going to look at all the coverage across the town, not just focus on the west side. And I thought we were going to look at where all the gaps are in town and figure out what the best solution is for the town-wide proposal. And it sounds like your comments are directed to, we want to proceed with the West School side. And I did not know that was where we were starting this evening's discussion.
Well, I think the most significant gap is on the west side here. And there's no silver bullet to.
There's a lot of other gaps in town.
You're right. We're gonna do a dry test in the entire town like we did in 2014.
But so why are we focused right now? And he's still telling us about why the West School site's the good
Because
site.
of that, I think they've already gone through, whether we're going to redo the work is one thing, but there is already work that's been done that identified a gap and a solution. And so we're trying to figure out what was done, how it was done, and how it was identified. And we can redo the drive test, but there's no reason to ignore work that was already done previously.
No, talking about the works that are already done, do we have access to the data? Because you've done the drive test, right?
In
We have not done the
2012.
drive test. This is something that the commission would
Verizon
consider.
did it? No?
Verizon provided coverage gaps. They have not.
Coverage gap, do
Yeah.
they have the data? Can I have a look at the data?
On the data they use for the modeling for the coverage
Yes.
gaps.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would pose that question to Shiva, who's the RF
Right.
engineer. I don't know if it is proprietary on the tools they use.
Then
But
if it's proprietary, it's maybe some
Mhm.
issue. We
Well,
need
sh-
transparency on this
Mhm.
type of data that are going to help us to make a decision, right?
sure,
Mhm.
Shiva, did you understand the question from Kareem?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So yeah, I don't think we can provide the data, but the plots, we have provided in the past hearings, meetings, they speak for itself. They have the coverage footprint, the RSRP values for and all those things. So the plots speak for itself.
Now, sorry, my background is actually in radar and I've done this type of plot. So the plot speak for itself. It's a little bit shallow, right? So what technology did you use? What technique did you use to compute this coverage?
So yeah, so
fine.
in the plots, the plots do mention, it's a 700 megahertz coverage, which is our a coverage layer for Verizon, which travels further than any frequency we have licensed.
What granularity and how detailed is it in terms of the space that you're covering? What is a grid size?
That I don't know. I mean, they are PDF plots, so
I
they
think
are plots on a paper.
People say that, okay, we're covering, that's great and stuff. And when I'm asking, I cannot get some answer that is professional. So I would like to have data. I just want data that back up. You made a lot of assertion and statement that this is dangerous for first responder. So if you base your analysis on somebody who cannot even give me the data and cannot explain the method that's been used and cannot share the data, I'm in my right to be doubtful, right? So I would like all the statement that have been made
We're doing a redraft,
verified.
which is why we're
And
doing a
we could
redraft study.
definitely, and they say statement, they say, oh, we want another drive analysis, but clearly the first analysis has not done properly.
Well, just to Verizon provided coverage plots for this site.
Yeah, but we
Okay.
see how they're doing it.
Okay. And because people don't believe the coverage plots and
Not
have an
believe.
engineer.
I'm not believing. It's not a question. I'm not in the believing space. I'm an engineer.
Mhm.
I've done that for my job. I'm just, if somebody does this analysis for me, I would like to verify it. And if somebody is not able to explain to me the methodology, the grid, the granularity, the size of the analysis that has been done, I'm entitled to say this is not professional. And every statement that is derived from that, I'm entitled to say you should not make any statement.
And I understand what you're saying, and I think that would probably be a conversation offline between yourself with a radar engineering background and Shiva, obviously a RF engineer, and you can talk that level of detail of what you're looking for.
I'd like to.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason, as I mentioned before, to engage a third party to do a drive test,
Absolutely,
and they
And
will
we
certainly.
should tell them in advance our expectation on the delivery of what they're providing. Because I'm not going to compromise for something that, oh, we've done a plot analysis, trust us.
Yeah.
I don't buy that, right? My function is to provide the support to the first selectman and all the constituents of New Canaan. And being professional, I have no angle, just getting the data right. And I'm also, my role is to highlight when I find that assertions are made too casually, especially when there's no backup on the data, right? So things that say, this is very damaging for health, for first responder, I'm all for that. This is super important. But not having data to say that actually there's a problem of coverage, this is not okay, because this is not representing the truth.
Well, I think we can certainly get you information, Corinne, that you're looking for on the detail, obviously. It's a little.
Right, right, if I can jump in.
Sure.
Yeah, let me jump in. So yeah, the plots we provide to the siting council and, the plots we provided to you, all the, to the towns, all those plots are a 10-meter grid size. But we do, we do provide them on PDF, on paper, and, PDF and paper. So as long as you zoom in and you can see, the name of roads and everything, I think that's all we can provide.
So the next delivery will have to specify that PDF is not, it's not useful to review the type of analysis.
I'm not sure what we're actually looking for. They tell us the methodology that they used and the information that's going in it and how they arrived at. I don't think we necessarily need the raw data to recreate it, but I would think that, so I guess I'm confused because it seems like I would think, Shiva, can Verizon provide us with the methods that they used and how they arrived at whatever testing they did do to get that? I think that's all we knew. So we know that when we do a new drive test or whatever, whether we're comparing apples to apples or not, I think we just need some explanation as to the methodology details, but not necessarily access to their, their systems
Formulas,
or formulas and
spreadsheet.
all that kind of stuff. I think it's
But
probably
for, I disagree. For the new test, I would have access to the data. Because.
But I don't know that that is reasonable, because I think
Why is
anybody
that
that's,
reasonable?
because most of these people that are in business of doing that may have it's reasonable to expect that they have proprietary.
No, not the person
technologies.
who's going to do the test for us on the drive-by.
Yeah, he's gonna
Absolutely
drive the
not.
test.
I can tell you, we can certainly provide methodology. In my 23 years, I've never been asked a question about providing raw data and dumps of what you're looking for. I'm gathering, but certainly I think it would be appropriate to put you in touch with Shiva directly. And, you're an
I
engineer
think
by
the
trade.
the RFQ should mention the fact that we want to see this measurement.
Oh,
If you-
excuse me, just a second. I think we're talking about two different things. Verizon has established a need based on coverage data that it has pulled together based on existing sites in the town and then coverage gaps. I think Ray is right. The data that goes into the model to produce the plots, to some extent, that information can be shared. The model is proprietary, and the model itself cannot be shared with you so that you can recreate or attempt to recreate the same information that Verizon has provided. The plots show what Verizon's RF design engineers have determined to be a need in the area. That's one piece of this, but the other piece of this is the town, as I understand it, and maybe Kevin can speak to it better, but the town is considering and has committed to performing its own drive test, put together its own plots that will be provided by an independent third party in an attempt to verify what Verizon and all of the other carriers have provided the town over the last couple of years through various applications for this drive data. So I'm not sure why all of the Verizon data is terribly important to you if you're going to do it yourself.
No. What I'm saying, I was just highlighting the fact that the first analysis has been done by somebody that could potentially have a conflict of interest, does not being transparent of the way the method is done, and come out with a coverage and things that are very important for us to make a decision. Now, I'm very delighted, and we already talked about it, that we will have another test that will be conducted by somebody who is more independent. I'm just highlighting the fact that we have to be objective and being careful when we draw conclusion. And that's why I'm like very happy that we'll get another test. And having the second thing is having access to the data is something that is more and more, I mean, it's legitimate. If you get somebody who is going to do an analysis for you, you have to have access to the data. It happened that in general, the people are not requiring it because they don't necessarily have the capability of doing the model. I've done a ton of this model, so I will see quickly if it has some weakness, if there is some default, because I mean, there is some real issue in the world, even in science, where people are manipulating the data and falsifying the result. Now, I'm not saying that it's something that Verizon would do, but it's clearly, if there's no way to check that, we are exposing ourselves to potential risk, knowing that there's a implicit conflict of interest. If you ask somebody who's going to put his own product and say, you're not covering anything, you cannot see anything, and wow, it's really dangerous because nobody can have any reception.
Why would Verizon want to build a?
Why? Because they're selling the product.
Yeah, it helps them.
But why, so they would, but they can build it anywhere. Why would they want to put someplace that's already covered?
Right.
I don't,
No,
you know what I mean? They're going to
They're gonna
spend a lot of,
spend-
Verizon's going to spend, I'm just saying, we should do the other drive-by coverage, but I'm failing to see the inherent conflict in the original data that was done. When Verizon is testing, they're not going to come build. I don't understand why we're concerned that they would build a tower where there's already coverage, because that doesn't increase their.
No, but they might choose a location that's going to increase their coverage the most. Like this helps them with Stanford and it helps, it doesn't
That's
just help
right.
us, it might not be the
Exactly.
best location for New Canaan. is
Can
my
you
thing.
ensure that?
But also, I guess I want to make sure Kareem, I understand.
Sure.
So the two tests, what we're asking for Verizon is to provide us with the methodology and how they created their plot coverage math. But the second is we are talking about engage an independent contractor the town's going to pay for. And for that, we can ask them to give us the actual raw data.
That's
I
what I'm
think
saying.
there's two
That's it.
different requests, right?
different,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that's an important.
Thank you for
distinction to make.
clarifying.
I just, I respectfully disagree on the need for raw data behind it. I don't see the need for it. As long as you, I don't understand why we need it or why we would pay for raw data.
Sorry, I don't want.
As long as as long as you can
I-
do the
I-
methodology, why are we creating something that
I'm
somebody's?
sorry, have you worked in this domain?
So, but explain it to me. I am on the
So I'm
commission
going
and
to
I'm
explain to
responsible
you.
for spending the money
I'm
as well.
going to explain to you, right?
Mhm.
You are going to make a decision on something that is important,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you have the ability to check the data, will you not do it? Would you, if a doctor is telling you you have a serious illness and
Mhm.
your rest of your life is pretty bleak, would you not ask for a second opinion?
Yes, I do, but I wouldn't ask to go in and look at how the MRI
What
was
is the second?
calibrated.
Hold on,
and
hold
how
on. That's
the-
a good example.
So no, this is why we
No,
would do the
no,
first one and the
One
second.
at a time,
please.
Yeah,
One
yeah,
at a
one
time.
Yeah.
This is a civil conversation.
Sure. That's a good example. Like when you have to see a second opinion, you have to provide the MRI disc
Mhm.
to the doctor who is going to do the same analysis and potentially also redo the analysis and get also a set of data. So in that context, I'm just getting the role of getting another second opinion.
But see, I think that is different. When you get the MRI data, you are getting the methodology and the results. You are not getting
You're
all
not
the
saying,
pings
"Give
and
me the
everything that
calibration
came
for
in
that
and give me
machine."
that same machine and let me look at that machine. It
never
is
say
not the
that.
same thing. Well, then that's what I want to be clear about what we're getting, because it sounds like
Okay, so
you
let's
want
give-
everything that they're pulling down to be able to recreate
no,
what they
let-
did.
let-
And that's
let
what it
me-
sounds
so
like.
Please don't interrupt.
Yeah.
Please don't interrupt.
Sure, but I mean,
It's two different. I think-
Well, so what you're saying and what is being communicated to Verizon, or what I'm understanding is is that you don't believe it because you don't have the raw data that you gave you. If they can
Sure.
give you the methodology and the testing and the parameters of everything that they gave, so that we can compare apples to apples with whatever second one that we do, I don't see why we're needing raw
I mean, it didn't
data.
say that.
He doesn't need the raw data from Verizon. I think he's saying what's the
Yeah.
raw data from the new independent
new one.
drive-by guy.
Yes, there's miscommunication or misinterpretation is what I'm
Oh,
saying.
well, I guess I don't know. What are you going to do with it from the second place if you don't have it from the first place either?
Because we have the map. You get to see the map, they say there's no coverage here.
I think we are kind of all saying the same thing, like the purpose of, let's get back to the purpose of tonight is that we are all starting from ground zero. And this is an information gathering mission now and in the next few weeks and months,
Exactly.
because not all of us have been in the weeds following all this since 2016. And thank you so much for that history.
Second. half for me.
You know, it is true that there have been gaps identified in the northeast and the northwest sections of New Canaan. I think that everyone would agree with. And what we are discussing tonight is because we happen to have Homeland Towers, who is connected to Verizon. This is data that exists. And so you're right, going forward for any third parties that we commission for these drive-by studies. And I think that our hope and our wish is that we'll have at least 2, maybe 3 vendors come in so we can all feel really good about it. We can ask for the sky and we don't know if we will get it because they
No,
may
sure, but
think
we
it's
can ask.
proprietary.
It's a-
Of course, we will ask for the sky in those RFPs. There are 4 maps at the end of the day, right? That could possibly be laid over New Canaan. Verizon's coverage map, T-Mobile's, for example, AT&T, and then our independent consultant. And they should all match up, right? So I think at the end of this process, we will have information from many sources. We'll have maybe more control over the data coming to us from this point forward. I think, again, we can ask, we don't know if that would happen. One of the questions that I had for Ray this evening is that Vicom is a consultant that has been used in the past, and I think that Homeland Towers has worked with. And I would like for you to explain your relationship with them. You know, again, suspicions run wild. So I would like you to set the public record straight on your independence or, you know.
Sure. It's VCOM, VCOMM. They're out of New Jersey. They are a company that provides coverage maps, testimony, RF reports, drive test data. They work for the cities, they work for towns, they work for the carriers. You're not ever going to find a company that does a drive test just for New Canaan. They don't exist out there. Anybody worth their weight out there with engineers and the technology and the tools. And these are engineers. They're putting their certification on these reports at the end of the day. And if you look on their website, you'll see that there's been times that they've challenged a carrier when they're working for the town and vice versa. They have a job. They're independent. They don't pick sides, but they're very well known in the industry. We've used other companies like C Squared. C Squared does a lot of work for AT&T. Another company comes to mind is PureCon. So you're not going to find, I don't believe, a lot of reputable companies, or I wouldn't use the word reputable, a lot of companies, period, in the Northeast that can offer this type of support and services that a town in New Canaan is looking for as far as third-party drive test data.
I have a quick question
Sure.
backing up. So if everyone agrees there's a coverage gap area on part of Frogtown Road and Llewellyn and Bridle Path and that whole low area, would a cell tower cover that area? Because I've read on the website that they don't account for dips in low areas are often not improved by cell towers. Would that improve a low area like that?
Verizon provided coverage maps last year I believe they're online,
Mhm.
and you can see Verizon presented coverage maps of existing coverage here today, New Canaan. And not only did they do that, they took the coverage, proposed coverage from 1837. They did that coverage and existing coverage, and you can see there's a hole. We call it the donut hole.
Okay.
And then they showed a site here at West School and what a cell tower would do for coverage, and it fills in the donut.
But I guess I'm asking, I saw those maps, but the problem is I've read that it goes over, it doesn't go down to the dips, and that is a low area. So would this solve the low topography
No,
problem?
it's terrain driven. Obviously, the technology, line of sight, it doesn't bend around mountains, it doesn't go through
It
mountains.
doesn't go down
and so
dips
forth.
either,
Oh, it
right?
does. It certainly, it's line of sight. But if you look at the coverage map, you'll see the roads are covered from the coverage maps. It
Right.
doesn't,
I saw that, but I don't know if that means it's going to go over those areas and not actually cover
No,
the low
no.
areas.
And to be quite honest with you, you're a subscriber, I would imagine. And everybody drives the roads, and you know where the dips are and where the coverages are. And you may have had the luxury of being able to drive the northeast area before Soundview came in, and now it's up there. And there's a lot of roads now that are now filled in, that are down in a ravine. So it all depends on the height,
Mhm.
the terrain,
Yeah.
the leaf clutter.
But your website does say that dips and low areas may not be improved, coverage may not be improved by the cell tower coverage. I want to,
I don't know if that's true, and every site is different. Every site is different.
Something that I thought was interesting that was mentioned that when a matter goes before the Connecticut Siting Council, they never use independent consultant coverage maps. They will only use carrier coverage maps. Is that true?
I believe so, and Ken Baldwin, the attorney, who's had a lot of experience, probably just as much as I have. I don't believe the Siting Council, Ken, in your experience, has ever gone out to a third party. I know there's been third parties that have tried to come in and challenge an application with their own coverage maps and so forth. But from my understanding and from my experience in dealing with the council for 23 years, is that they go on the face value of what the carrier is presenting on their coverage plats. Now, they will task that carrier with providing, okay, give me a coverage plot for 100 feet. Give me a coverage plot for 125 feet. Show me your 700 meg coverage. Show me your 1900 meg coverage. But they trust the carriers, obviously. Ken, I'm not sure if you heard the question, but Chris had asked if the Siting Council ever uses third-party information when looking at coverage plots, and I believe they just go off the carrier's plots.
Yeah, that's right. They have not, in my experience for the last 28 years, have not done their own independent plots to try and verify what the carriers are telling them their need is in a particular area. They will challenge us on height to determine whether we need the height that is requested. That is a typical challenge that they'll pose to us. But I go back to a point one of the commissioners made earlier. Verizon doesn't spend a lot of time in the state of Connecticut going forward with tower applications that'll cost them between $2 and $3 million with all of the process and the cost for construction without a need for those facilities. So I think, there's that's not something Verizon's going to spend time, effort, and money doing unless they can identify and convince the Siting Council that there's a need for those facilities.
I think that's an important point, because the point is, are they really conflicted or not? If they don't have a need, are they going to try and drive a tower? But if they're not making the investment for the tower, you are, or we are.
We're making the investment. They're making the investment with their equipment, obviously.
That's right. But their investment is not nearly as big as if they were building the tower themselves.
That's correct.
But if we could just for a minute and back off from the coverage for a second, could you just describe how you work with the different cell phone carriers, how they deal with you, and how they actually pick where they want to spend their money? And I presume there's competitors to you that they're calling as well, and which equipment you would represent and put in your networks as you design them to satisfy Verizon or T-Mobile or whoever it happens to be working. How does that whole process work? Because that's really key, I think.
Sure. What I can tell you is, we'll take Verizon, for example. They have their own SEDAC real estate folks that go out and secure cell sites, be it on an existing structure or when there's no structure, we call it a raw land in the industry. And there's times Verizon will build their own raw land site and they will incur the construction cost themselves. They'll take it through zoning, leasing, the whole 9 yards, and they will own that structure. They're in the business of running a network for their subscribers. They're not in the business really of developing sites because these are astronomical sites we're talking about in cost perspective. So they rely on companies like Homeland Towers, a local developer, to kind of partner with because we're willing to spend the investment. We recoup it obviously on our fees that we charge a carrier to co-locate on. But there's times we will work hand in hand with Verizon. They will come to us because they know our background. They know the how the council respects us. They know that we are good at very difficult sites, and they know that we don't give up. We don't operate, as mentioned earlier, on an annual budget. We see a need and we put our head down and try to solve it. So when we're looking at sites in a given area, we will be in touch with a Verizon or an AT&T or a T-Mobile or a Dish, their RF engineers, to say, we know there's a coverage gap here. Common sense tells you drive certain roads, your phone drops off. You look at coverage maps online through Siting Council. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out where the gaps are sometimes, but we will sometimes get their input on where they need to be or where they want to be. They have what's called search rings out there. And sometimes they share those with us to help us out, to focus where that location is going to be. And other times we, as a developer, go out and speculate to say, we think this is going to be a great location. I've been doing this long enough to know the terrain, topography. There's a cell site here, there's another cell site here. You know, there's 6 miles in between. Let's put one in the middle. Let's look at the terrain. It makes sense. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but you know, we talk all the time. We present them with our marketing lists of where we have ground leases in place. And sometimes we'll have a lease that we sit on for 4, 5, 6 years, no interest. And other times we have a ground lease and my phone rings the next day once we put it out there. And they're like, we've been waiting for a developer to bring a site in that particular area.
I guess what we're struggling with is you described Verizon has its network that it's trying to fill out, understand it, it's revenue optimizing, right?
Sure.
Based on subscriptions and coverage, et cetera. You are trying to build towers and develop other things. And what we're trying to do and what you've done for us is design a network.
Sure.
Right. We're trying to design a network that covers our 105 miles of road and all 20,000 residents. And we're trying to figure out, are we getting the right answer that we're looking for? Or are Verizon and you being driven by different things? And for example, are we looking at enough different technologies in the design as we go forward? And focusing just on the one tower doesn't answer that question. There's no doubt the tower is in a very nice place where it is.
Sure.
Right.
Could I make 2 comments? One is the Siting Council doesn't like proliferation. Co-location is a right that the carriers have. And so therefore, Siting Council will generally want to have a new site that has more than one carrier. They don't want someone saying, I want to be over here. Somehow or other, they work it out. They don't talk to each other because they're competitors. But Ray's kind of the intermediary to try to. The other thing is Janae's comment about the carriers don't care about geographical boundaries. They don't care about New Canaan versus
Right.
Stanford.
Right.
They want to care about where their network is serving their customers
Right.
because they have customers everywhere. They don't care about our borders. We get the benefit of some towers that are outside of New Canaan, and other towns get benefit of carriers the towers that are in New Canaan. The Silver Hill Hospital gives more coverage to Wilton than it gives to New Canaan.
Well, I guess that's my question. I
That's-
guess
yeah.
what I'm trying to say is, I think as a council, though, our duty is to try and improve it for the town of New Canaan. And I worry that we're a little bit at odds with what Verizon's goals may be, which is just to increase coverage for their customers. So
Right.
the right location for Verizon may not be the right location for our town. We may just put a tower 200 feet over that would solve more of the town's coverage issues. Like, I just think we need to be open-minded.
Jenna, there's also an important consideration. We want West School to have cell service.
Right.
That's a safety issue,
Right. Mhm.
right? That's always been from day one. We want to be in that neighborhood, just like St. Luke's happens to be the highest point in town. That's a logical location because you get broader coverage when you're coming from the highest ridge in town.
St. Luke's is not happy about the towers. I mean, the headmaster
They are
just came out, the headmaster just came out and spoke and said he was not happy about that.
At the
tower.
time, the new headmaster came from New Hampshire, talked to her and her
Well,
husband.
They just, a statement in the advertiser saying that they were not happy about the towers.
Well,
It's in
they are, the
paper.
school, the point being, the school is benefiting from a safety standpoint now because that tower exists.
Yeah, but they were not happy.
I
about
have
it.
kids there.
They're not happy that Verizon's
yeah.
taken maybe a little longer than they expected to provide coverage, and I think they're getting complaints from the parents that there's no coverage there for Verizon. AT&T was the anchor tenant.
Mhm.
I think that's been the gripe. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
What you're saying is exactly right. I mean, our goals in our town are perhaps different, and we're struggling with that.
Right.
Are your goals lined up with our goals? You've given us a great network with good tower locations, et cetera. Is that the optimum? And we're here to recommend stuff to Kevin and to poke at it. And I think that as I've talked to people, the biggest thing to poke at is how quickly, or is there a way to get away from having towers? Is there in the short term? And the answer to that is, well, 5G doesn't work in your town because of your topography, and it costs too much to put all those in, right? And nobody's doing it. And what is interesting to me as I've listened to this stuff, it doesn't appear that the carriers really are looking to to invest in our town. Otherwise, you would have been here a lot. You would be pushing a lot harder, and they would be pushing a lot harder. This thing has gone on forever, right?
Well, that's not true. AT&T, because they had FirstNet, and they were given $9 billion by the federal government to go out and build more towers. AT&T over the past 5-6 years has been much more aggressive in New Canaan. They did the Northeast Tower. They started the Northwest Tower. And so AT&T, because of their mandate to help first responders, FirstNet is a totally first responder oriented. They got money to build more towers from the federal government
To support first responders.
to support.
And we're gonna talk about that. We're
So,
gonna talk
on the
about
other hand,
first
Verizon-
responders and how much they're driving.
No offense to Ken, Verizon went away after their experience with Puddin Hill, and they disappeared for 5 or 6
Right.
years. They're catching up now. At the meantime, they're also working everywhere on the country. I mean, they are the leading provider in the country. And as AT&T is there, it's like Pepsi and Coke, and then T-Mobile's out there with this other thing that doesn't work in some areas, but works very well in many areas. So
So while, can I just ask one
Yeah.
question? So with that said, so we are trying to, our goal as a commission is to improve the cell service in New Canaan. I would assume the plot maps show us what that's going to do. Are we able to look at that and say, but it's not covering this part of it, and if we moved it, it would? And then how much discretion is there to work? I guess, how much discretion do you have with Verizon to work with Verizon? Like that, is it an all or nothing game? We get the West Tower or when we get no tower? So we
Could I-
approve.
could I-
So my question is, do we get cell tower, West Tower, or no tower and nothing?
Could I ask
Or is
Ken to
there a
address that?
different-
Ken's been working in the area. He's
Yeah.
been working in New Canaan for over 25 years.
Yeah.
Right. And he's come at different locations at different times. Ken, can you sort of address that as to what Verizon is trying to do in terms of build out?
I think it's fair to say that Verizon is simply trying to provide the best service that it can provide in New Canaan at various locations. We've got a number of sites already in town. They provide a coverage footprint of a certain area. We've provided you with map that shows what those areas are, including the still to be built New Canaan, what we call New Canaan Northwest up on Ponus Ridge. We have activated the site now up at near St. Luke's. So that site is on air providing coverage, and as Ray stated earlier, it shows a significant gap in service in and around the West School property, which is why we're so interested in that site. If there's another tower site that the town thinks is better for the town's purposes and something that the town wants to pursue and then offer to Verizon and the other carriers, it'll be evaluated. And, my guess is if it's somewhere near the West School or close to the West School property at a certain height, it's probably going to provide some level of service, maybe comparable to what the West School provides. But, we can listen to Ray. He's been looking at a number of different alternatives around the West School property, and And I'm not sure how many that he was able to identify as viable alternatives to the West School property. So I think that the short answer is if the town comes up with something that they think is a better option, it'll be evaluated, and Verizon will make a decision as to whether they think it's worth the investment to install antennas on a new structure at that location, based on what it does for them and for their network. You know, one of the reasons why we went away for as long as we did is because we were running into roadblocks every time we tried to build something in New Canaan. And at some point, the network executives will decide to take their budgets, their build program budgets, and go spend it somewhere else where there aren't as many roadblocks being put in the way. And I understand why. I've been doing this a long time. I understand why towns and residents don't want to see towers or don't want them in their neighborhoods. I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. And so at some point, after many years of trying and many efforts on Verizon's part, Verizon said, okay, let's focus somewhere else if New Canaan doesn't want us. We're still on Waveney Park Water Tank, providing service in the southern part of town. We're still on the old Armory site in Norwalk, which provides some service into New Canaan. We're on Silver Hill Hospital. We're up at St. Luke's now. We're on a rooftop at Locust Street down the center of town, and we've got a bunch of small cells. So there is some level of service in New Canaan, but that entire west side of the town, including the northwest corner, where Ray's other tower would provide service, is currently unserved by Verizon and its network.
You also you didn't mention the country club, don't it?
Well, that's another, another existing structure that Verizon would like to be on, but we don't own that tower. SBA does, and it has been, I'll just say, a challenge to try and get SBA to focus and to work with the country club to make that tower available to us. It's a brown stick or a flagpole tower, whatever you want to call it. Internal antennas, they would have to be extended to accommodate Verizon's use of that structure. We need additional ground space. So there have been a number of challenges for, I don't know, Kevin, how long we've been talking about the country club? At least 5 years.
4 or 5 years, yeah.
But I think one thing we need to remember, and maybe you could comment on this, Ken, or you, Ray, and that is, quite frankly, the town's not in charge. The reason we're making land available is we want to take charge of some of this and be able to dictate how tall they are and where they are, et cetera. But quite frankly, we're not in charge unless it's on our land, right? And Verizon could be going to Joe Blow down the block and saying, you own an acre. I want a half of it, and I'll give you this much over the next year. Let's build a 185-foot tower with antennas everywhere.
Yeah,
What do you say?
You can't build in an acre. You gotta have 4 acres.
No, but if okay, 4 acres or whatever you come up with. But the point is you wouldn't get a vote on it, Kevin, as you do on this one, where we're putting a lease out, right? Now, planning and zoning, I think, gets a little bit of a vote, but not much. Once it goes to the siting council, the siting council can override them, right? They put out what they believe should be the proper planning and zoning specifications for towers with the height limits and the kind of towers that we ought to use, but they can be overridden by the siting council on a piece of private property.
Right.
That's right.
I have a question too. So for your plot that you've done, you are suggesting that the West School is the best site. And is that the last tower the town would need under your estimation, or do we need more towers after that
In other parts of town,
in other parts of town?
eastern part of town, center part of town.
So we still need 2 more towers. We need 3 towers probably
Yeah.
by your estimation.
Yeah.
I need a bunch of them.
How do you think and just asking, that's what I want to know, like, do we think we need 5 more towers, 3 more towers? Like, what are we thinking?
I
we
can't
need?
speak to that. I mean, that's an RF question particular to Verizon's network, particular to AT&T's network, to T-Mobile's network, where Verizon may want to do a tower, maybe T-Mobile wants to do a small cell. So it's different strokes for different folks, depending on where they are and how their network is operating.
Okay.
Um,
It said here that you were the cellular network designer, so I thought you were trying to design a network for our town.
No, you've had folks design a network. You've had Cityscape pick locations. You had your Centerline back in 2014. And oh, by the way, if you look at the Centerline report, guess what the #1 location was back then for the next likely tower location?
So,
The West School,
in Irwin, I thought they said.
West School in Irwin Park.
Yeah. So
And
you,
I will tell you, not to cut you off, but I believe and Shiva can back this up. If the tower were to go in at West School, that would negate the need for a site at Irwin Park.
but you're saying, I just want to understand, so the whole town has the visibility into how many towers we're talking we would need to have good coverage by your estimation in town.
So as a developer, I will not build a tower that is going to fill a discrete hole of an eighth of a mile. A carrier will figure that out and either live with that gap or they'll do a small cell. They're not going to build a tower for a discrete coverage gap. Neither would Homeland Towers. We would never get carriers to be interested in that.
So you all just do towers, though. You don't do do you do small cells as well?
We do towers.
Right,
only do
Verizon has
towers.
done about 7 small cells in town. They're for capacity.
What is the process for doing a small cell in town or doing,
Ken can address it. It's a rather expedited process.
you don't hear about any of those.
The small cells that Verizon has been developing have been utilizing existing electric distribution poles in public rights of way. And the process to get those sites approved goes to the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. It can be a lengthy process, but based in a short description of it is we send notice to immediately adjoining property owners, and generally there are 2 or 3. Those are property owners that are immediately adjacent to where the pole is located, plus the owner across the street. They have the right to either consent or object to the proposal. If they consent, it goes through an expedited review and approval process by the Public Utility Authority. Takes us anywhere from 30 to 60 days. If the property owners object, then they're entitled to proceed through a hearing process, which can take between 3 and 6 months to go through. But they are fairly straightforward. It's usually a single antenna attached to either the top or the side of a pole, and a small radio head that's attached about 8 feet above the ground. They are for very limited purposes. They provide, as Kevin said, they provide capacity relief in most cases. They will also provide some coverage benefit. There was discussion before about, low areas on a roadway that might not receive adequate coverage from a macro cell, a tower site in an area. Shiva can use those small cells sometimes to provide that very discrete area of coverage that a macro cell can't provide due to topography, for example.
The utility commission you talked about is a state level, right? The town never sees it.
Pura.
State
Pura.
level.
Pura.
Pura. Oh, okay,
regulates
it's
the-
Pura.
They really,
Okay.
they like the
Let's go to
electric.
Pura.
utility, Yeah.
It'd go to Pura. And if you wanted to put some small cells in, or if we wanted you to put some small cells in, I live in a place where there's no cell coverage and it's very close to town.
Ray doesn't do that. That's not Ray's business.
So that wouldn't, so
That's the carriers themselves.
that's the carriers themselves. And how would we go to them, Kevin? You would call them?
No, Verizon's been doing all this on their own.
Yeah, but if we wanted to
If you're talking
motivate
about DOS,
and
DOS is a whole
increase it.
separate subject about doing a lot of, like Wellesley, Massachusetts did 30 nodes. They own their own utility poles.
So how do we integrate that analysis with what we're seeing for the towers? I think that's what people are asking.
I
That's-
think part of the answer to that is, we've got to get the macro network set before you can start looking too deeply at small cells and the infill, especially on the coverage side. The small cells that we've done, kind of in and around the train station and around the center of town, have looked at existing capacity needs in those areas. So those are easier to identify a need. You've got a lot of people during the what used to be the morning rush hour at the train station, and Verizon can see that their usage goes up, so they need something in there to provide additional capacity. But if there's a particular need in a particular area, you can reach out to Verizon and let us know what your concerns are, and it'll be evaluated, and there'll be determination made as to whether it is a candidate for some type of solution, whether it's a small cell or some other type of solution that might provide the service that you claim is lacking.
I guess I'd like to understand this. So what Rich was saying, so I guess the concern is, we talk to Homeland Towers, they say we need towers. Of course, they sell towers. I get that. but then we know there's still going to be gaps. So then we're also going to have to do small cells. And then we're going to still need some more towers. And I guess I think the town, what I keep being told by people is we want to understand the overall plan. Like we want to understand in this area, we need to do this, in this area, we need to do this, in this area, if we build a tower, like an overall plan for the town, as opposed to this whack-a-mole of let's fix this neighborhood. Oh, well, that didn't really fix that. So let's do this here. Let's do that there.
Well, that's what Tom Teslick and the Utilities Commission did before. The plan was, they responded
Mhm.
to Cityscape's recommendation and Centerline, and they responded with a recommendation. That's what we're executing on now.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And quite honestly, in my mind, there's really only two other locations, the east side and downtown.
Kevin, did that include small cells?
No,
No.
well, actually, I'm
Which
sorry.
is- which is
If
Janae's
you- If
question.
you read Tom's strategy, it says after the macro sites are done, just as Ken just said, we will then address some locations, and Verizon went and did it on its own. Homeland Towers doesn't do that. They build macro sites. Right?
So
Because-
so to build the macro sites first, I have the same problem Janae has, which is how do we integrate that?
Well, again, it's not as
I
though,
mean, how do you do that?
nobody has a desire to build a lot of towers, because one, right, we are under towered,
Right,
right? Compared to Manhattan, where there's thousands of antennas around.
Right.
you, Right? And yet we have a need in certain areas, and that's exactly what the strategy has been. Let's attack them where the need is, and then look at locations for small
Like,
cells.
I know Homeland Towers doesn't do this, for example, but when the one goes up on Ponus Ridge, the northwest tower, and then there's still a donut hole, how do we know small cells, 2 or 3 small cells wouldn't solve that coverage issue?
Because you have to pull from a big
Right,
signal.
well, we have the
fiber
big
extender.
signal, right?
No,
At the
yeah.
Ponus Ridge at Northwest, we're gonna have a big signal
We
when that
will
goes
have
up.
big
So that's what I'm saying. So
The-
then,
the-
how do we know small cells wouldn't
other-
solve that problem?
Isn't this the
Especially
point
the
of-
gap.
is-
Well, that's my
point of the
question,
design.
actually, Ray, you touched, or we're gonna start to touch on it, that you said, these small cells only do 1/8 of a mile or whatever you said. What are typical ranges and circles of these macro sites? Like you said, you wouldn't consider it unless it was 2
Sure.
miles, 3
Yeah.
miles. I'm making this up, but.
And what I tell people, I could build a tower in the middle of Long Island Sound. I could put a caisson foundation 100 feet down. Is it feasible? Is it realistic? No, it's not. Is it realistic for a carrier? And the town has looked at this to come in and string antennas on every single light pole through New Canaan. Have 0 towers, have every street covered. It could be done. It's just not realistic. It's not feasible. And getting to your question, Chris, as far as towers, it's all driven on the height of the tower. Is it above the tree line? How high is 150, 180? What's the terrain like? Typically, a reliable signal on average, and don't hold me to this, will go out about a mile, mile and a quarter. And then the goal is that the cell area is to have overlap and hand off to another cell site. And that phone call travels to the next tower, and you want to have them overlap. So if you start looking at cell sites on a map, they're kind of based out or spread out every 2, 3, 4 miles from each other. But every site operates differently. Shiva's been doing this a while. No 2 sites are the same based on height, topography, things of that nature.
So Verizon's not gonna be is gonna be on that northwest tower. It was
Yes.
AT&T built it, but you're gonna be on it. Verizon's gonna be on it as well.
I'm building it.
Sorry.
AT&T was my anchor. Verizon would be on it, and the town would be on it for public safety. And we would make it available for T-Mobile and Dish as well. They're the other 2 providers.
So in general, right? Like if you see New Canaan, it's like a big map, right? And if I understood you, you're going to put some macro sites in order to have the maximum of coverage, right? And then there will be some small hole that we can fill up. The question is like, how do you do this choice in the sense that a macro tower will cost you quite a lot, so you have to optimize the cost of the macro tower versus the little one, the cell tower. And what is the driver? Is the driver how Verizon will be able to make it useful, or how you're going to be able to because as you say, like if I put thousands of big tower on New Canaan, it's not viable because it will be too expensive for you. And that, so
Correct.
do you have a sense of like the ratio that you need to, the cost versus the coverage?
As a developer, we know we're going to incur costs to lease that site,
Okay,
to permit that site, to get everything ready for siting council, which packets about this thick,
okay.
and then to construct a site. And we know sites based upon certain access roads and how challenging they are to construct and where costs are these days. You know, we're spending $1 million roughly at the end of the day,
Okay.
Coleman Towers. Now, how we recoup that, Kareem, is we make that tower co-locatable
Yeah.
to other carriers. We collect tower rents, obviously, from the other carriers. And again, going to the fact that AT&T has written a letter to the first selectman in November. They're committed to the site as well. You know, they're not putting that out there because they don't have a need. They're stating that they have a need and this would satisfy their need and their coverage.
What is the
It seems
town
to me
making?
that-
And if you're making the money from the carriers and the lease, how is the town making money?
We're paying the town a ground rent.
Seems to me not to draw a line under this, but the questions that we seem to be coming back to all the time are, you know, what is our coverage? Seems to me that we need to approve the study, analyze the data from the study. Some of us can just look at the PDFs and go, okay. And others of us are going to feed it into their proprietary model. And, you know, and that's all helpful and it's all good stuff, but, you know, I think, you know, asking Ray and, you know, and Ken and Shiva, you know, to speculate on where the coverages are, where the holes are gonna be,
You're
you
right.
know,
You're right.
we're,
You're
I think we've pushed them I think we've pushed these people as far as we can tonight.
Yeah.
Well, there's an implicit, there's an implicit conclusion that comes with Ray's offer that we want to lease a site from you, and that is that they won't be overtaken by small cells in the future, and they won't be overtaken by other technologies in the future that will degrade the value of the cell of the tower. That's just implicit. You guys have made that conclusion.
That's a business
That's a
decision.
business
Of
decision,
course, I
right?
wouldn't
That's a
be,
business
I'm not
decision.
here for my.
Right, exactly. Not recreation, right?
It does feel like it's second
Come on, it's a
home to
good
me
time.
every time I walk out the door. My wife says, "You going to New Canaan?" It's the
Just comment.
running joke.
You said it as you kicked this off, you said that there's a lot of other towns that are like New Canaan that are just difficult to deal with. Could you just tell us what makes this so difficult and what we could do to fix that? I mean, it's incredible to me that we are into this by at least 15 or 20 years, right? And we've
Rich, let me
made
answer
great
that.
progress under Kevin.
Let me answer that. First of all, Westport, Darien, they have I-95. There's some huge towers along I-95 and they give great coverage because they're 180 feet tall.
Mhm.
Same thing with the Merritt.
Yep, and they don't have as much topography as we have.
And but the carriers historically, if you don't have density, they're saying, how many customers are we really trying to serve there? So they'll say, okay, well, this serves a state road. We got a lot of people driving up and down that. That's why 123 was always the objective for the Northeast because that's a busy state road. All right. So they're looking to where are the customers, not just in houses, but how many people are traveling around on major roads. And that's the way they look at it. And we're a much more residential town than Westport, Darien. So we've always been the more expensive place for the carriers to come in and provide service. So we're just at the tail end. Difference is 5G came along and now is roaring ahead, right? We were told 3 years ago, we wouldn't see 5G for 10 years
Mhm.
and everything changed.
Does that change the requirement for towers?
No.
No,
No.
I made a mistake. You corrected me. I was under the impression 5G antennas will go farther. They don't. They in fact may go less far.
Okay.
So
They use a higher spectrum and shorter.
Higher frequency, shorter throw.
I guess another question along those lines is, have you worked with another difficult leafy community like ours where it's very challenging in geography? And something worked really well. Do you have a case study that we can
could
hang our hat on?
parallel.
Look, I've done sites in Westchester, North Salem.
Okay,
These are equestrian communities, and I get it. New Canaan is a beautiful, very affluential community. People have their biggest investment in their homes, and I think that's what the number one fear or concern is, that they're paying such a high property tax. They've made such a huge investment. The fear that they have is that, oh my gosh, the tower in my area, in my neighborhood is now going to devalue my house property value. And that is just not the case. Yes, if you have an Eversource tower or a Homeland tower and it's 180-foot monopole and it's in your backyard, it will devalue. I'm not going to sit here and try to sugarcoat that. But the reality is it's funny, in New York, when we go through the planning board process, the local boards, they ask us to do an appraisal. We don't do it. We do an appraisal. And the appraiser does comps of homes with a view of a tower and homes without a view. 99% of the times it comes out, the cost per square foot does not change. It's the same.
Well,
And, you know, the argument could maybe be made 25 years ago that it could devalue residential property. Not today. The young generation, they want to have reliable coverage to run their business out of their home, to keep in touch with their children at school, to keep in touch with their elderly parents, to have their wireless home security system work. Nobody has landlines anymore. And, you know, I keep coming back to this property at the west side, you know, 47.47 acres wooded, less than an acre of visibility from a 2-mile radius. It doesn't get much better than that. And I know Kevin's mentioned before the tower on 123 at the country club and the house that sold across the street.
$6.5 million.
Yeah.
That person is either blind or doesn't think it affects his value.
That is a monopole,
And
though.
the
That's different
tower-
from the tower we're
Monopole,
talking about.
And there are
building.
people that think that tower is ugly.
The tower I did on
You know,
Cornish Ridge.
Tom Teslick didn't like that tower because he could see it from his house on Roanoke Ridge.
Right, but this is a different
Well,
kind of tower you're talking about,
different kind of-
building behind
No,
West.
actually, no one's talking about, we will never have branching towers like this in New Canaan. Tom Teslick made that very clear. We will never have that. AT&T made the mistake of proposing that at the transfer station. It got shut down real quick.
We'll never have it if you continue to support and we continue to support on government land.
Oh, well,
If you
actually,
come up with private property, you can't guarantee you're not going to have a.
on the other hand,
tower
I don't
with-
think
with
carriers-
antennas.
I've kept, I've operated on good faith here in town and
Right.
in dealing with Kevin,
Mhm.
that I told him I would keep my towers 110 feet and below on private property. And the site at Soundview Lane is 85 feet, 5 feet taller with branches, we'll call it 90 feet. The site at 1837 Cornish Ridge will be 110 feet tall.
Can I just make another point real quickly, Ray? I mean, the question was what are other towns doing differently? I think what New Canaan is doing differently, at least in the last 5 or 7 years or so under Kevin's leadership, the town has been taking the lead in identifying locations where they think the service could be provided as efficiently as possible in a manner that would satisfy the carrier's needs. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today. No other town and I've worked in just about every town in Fairfield County and throughout the state of Connecticut, no other town has gone to the extent that New Canaan has to identify municipal properties so that it can improve wireless service in the town. No other town. Other towns have offered town properties after we've done all the legwork and identified particular needs, but no other town has done what New Canaan has done in my experience.
And that was Tom Teslick. That was exactly, read his strategy.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
exactly what the strategy was.
What would happen if the town just stepped back and said, this is just like the old days. This is not a utility. This is a deal with the carriers. Do whatever you want. Do it on the private property. Do whatever you want. We're just going to step back. What would happen?
Well,
We'll deal
we're
with
not going to do
carriers.
that. We're not-
Well,
we're not
I
gonna do
didn't say,
that.
I didn't suggest it. What would happen?
From my perspective, as I started off my presentation is, I don't operate on an annual budget like the carriers. When the need is there, I'm persistent. I have a job to do. You run the risk of having it on private property. I still would design it the best I could aesthetically, the least visual impact, the least environmental impact. It's just how I do my sites because Siting Council will certainly scrutinize me. But we won't stop. We'll keep looking. And then if the town passes on town property, it has a very good chance of going to private property. Now, to this date, nobody on private property has raised their hand. Let me take that back. There's been a few people that have expressed an interest. We've looked at it. It's not as good. Obviously, it's more of a in-your-face visual impact type property. The town has the best property here.
But there is enough revenue for the services to continue to drive it without us trying to drive them.
Well, you run the risk as well as, yes, we would still keep looking. Would I keep looking as hard as I have been and trying to deal with the town for the better of 8, 9 years? I have a lot, it's 169 towns in the state of Connecticut. I deal with Westchester. I'm building sites in the Hamptons. I'm a very busy guy. We're a busy company. We have a lot of priorities. And I think this is a beautiful opportunity for the town to recoup the revenue, control it to some extent with the aesthetics and location, and do something for the community, provide a service for your residents and for the first responders.
If we, I'm sorry.
So you keep saying you can control it, but it was clear when you met with the planning and zoning commission and all, you were saying we really can't control it. It goes to siting council. We can't control how tall it is once they build it. You can build, they
no,
can build it, they
no,
can
that's-
add
no,
on.
That's
it-
not true.
That's what you were told at the planning and zoning commission.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can write into the lease a cap on the tower height.
Mhm.
We don't always suggest that because the council wants to make sure, as Ken had mentioned, that these towers are not to be proliferated. They want to be co-locatable.
Mhm.
But we've had landlords that will write in a height cap
Right.
for
And
that
and
tower.
let me understand, Ken, you were the one that told plan and zoning what they could not do. What were you saying plan and zoning had no power over?
Well,
The property.
No, this is over the town. This is about the town thing with that West School. He met with, told planning and zoning they didn't have any real say.
the Planning and Zoning Commission cannot impose the municipal zoning requirements on any tower that goes to the Connecticut Siting Council. Because as someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Rich, that the Siting Council has preemptive authority over municipal zoning regulations and wetland regulations. So the Siting Council, notwithstanding, for example, a restriction in a local zoning regulation that might impose a setback for the tower, the Siting Council can decide that it wants the tower set back a certain distance from a property line, but it doesn't have to adhere to those local regulations. It has the authority to preempt. I think that's what I was referring to.
We don't really have complete control on town land either, is.
Well, yes, we do it
Well,
because it's
On
a
the
lease.
leasing end, you do, certainly.
If you don't sign the lease, there's no tower.
If you don't sign the lease, yeah, but.
It's either my way or the highway.
Yeah, so what, yes,
Yeah, keep in mind,
That's where you lose it when you go to
siting council.
or to private property, because then it's just siting council and we don't have any control.
But
over
even
it.
those, once we do the lease, then they put the tower, right?
No, but if they don't,
But we can
they
just
still have to
control the
comply. We have a
lease.
contractual relationship, so they would still have to comply with our contract.
Of course.
The siting committee, what would happen is if the siting committee says, no, you can't have a 120-foot tower, you need a 180-foot one, and our
It's a
lease has
violation
it
of the leasing,
capped,
we cut it down.
and then the lease is done, yeah, so there's no tower.
We cut it down.
There-
We just did that in the town of Wilton on a piece of town property where we had an original location selected on the school bus parking lot on School Road. And we went through a local municipal consultation process. Some neighbors had some input. We shifted the tower location at their request. And ultimately they capped the tower height in that instance. I think it was 110 feet or 120 feet. And built that right into the lease. So here's a lease exhibit that says the tower will be located here. And the tower will not exceed a height of X, whatever they want that to be. We go to the siting council and say, okay, here are our contractual restrictions. We're proposing a tower of a certain height at a particular location based on the lease agreement that we have signed. If the siting council then says to us, we don't like that location, we want you to go somewhere else, we go back to square one with the town, for example, and ask them to reconsider, and they can tell us no. But in that case, and in just about every case, if the town is on board with the location and the carriers are comfortable with a restriction on height, as long as it works for the network and they go forward with the application, they're going to comply with those restrictions.
So we can stop them from making it 140, like if we say 110 feet and then other carriers want to be on that tower, they won't be allowed to be on that tower.
Well, not without your ability to renegotiate the lease. I mean, you'd have to agree to that. I think that's the contractual limitation that you can impose on the tower being the landlord.
Be
people,
careful what you wish for, because the tower at the country club is built for 2 carriers. AT&T and T-Mobile are on there. Verizon is having difficulty, as Kevin mentioned. At some point, if SBA doesn't allow them on, you may find a tower company or carrier trying to do a new tower over there to help them out. The goal with these towers is to stop tower proliferation. We design our towers for 6 carriers. It's just smart business sense. We don't know where the future is going. We know there's 4 active carriers right now, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Dish. And then you put public safety on there. So we over-design our towers from a foundation standpoint. We make them all to be extendable by 20 feet. But again, the town as a landlord controls a lot of contractual lease language in our agreements.
Last questions. We got to get to the next.
Yeah,
This is interesting, but it's.
No, I don't have any more questions.
any-
I think this was very informative, and I
Okay.
thank you very much, Ray.
Yeah, Karim?
No, I'm good. No, those are very helpful.
I would also note, Homeland Towers was selected in 2016. They
Right.
spent the entire year 2017 designing a tower for Waveney Park. It was going to be 150 feet tall. It had to be taller because Aquarium said we don't want the antennas on there anymore.
Yeah.
They got, they did all that work. And then Aquarium came back in January and said, okay, we'll keep the antennas.
Just kidding.
Just kidding. Well, but so they didn't get paid for that. They spent a lot of money designing a tower that never got built.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I would mention, look at some towns around us. Greenwich Hospital has an 180-foot tower attached to the hospital building. Ridgefield has a 175-foot tower in the center of town.
Yep.
Weston has a 180-foot tower in the center of town, 200 feet from an elementary school. So we don't have that in New Canaan. We don't want that in New Canaan, but that's what's in other towns to get cell service.
It's all wrong.
Can you comment about the process going forward? I mean, this has been a pretty slow process. I think you've been successful on moving it forward, Kevin, but it was stuck in the mud for a while.
No, the problem here, keep in mind,
But
PNC
just talk about from right now, if we put the pedal to the metal, when can we finish with the towers, with the West Tower and with the tower builds in New Canaan?
Well, West Tower, we have to get over the hurdle of convincing people there is no health issue.
But-
900 feet from school.
But the approvals we need for that. we're
Because
just-
even P&Z put that in their approval. They said, let's check out the health issue again. Right.
Well-
But people have to believe that. Right.
Okay, but the people that have to approve the lease is
Town
first
council.
selectmen.
It's got to go back to the town council.
the selectmen and the town council, right?
Does it go Board of Selectmen, Board of
Selectmen,
Finance?
no, the lease execution, we intentionally brought it to P&Z first because we knew that they had been in the game for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're the most deliberative body we have. They're not political,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And they approved it. They said it's a good location. And they put some conditions on it, make sure you do, I think there were 5 conditions. Because they were doing an 824 review where anything built on town property has to be approved by P&Z. Town council has to approve anything built on town property.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so
and Board of Selectmen are just the details of the lease. We will execute the lease, however the board is.
But the West School Tower has the approval of P&Z today.
Back
Is
in
that
October.
correct?
Back in October.
Back in October.
Right.
And
But there's some issue about whether that was a valid approval, I think, by 824 because of the information I think it was debatable if that's a valid approval. We have to go.
We
look
could
at
take
that.
it back to P&Z if you want to.
but we could do that. So there's 3 people. There's P&Z, there's selectmen, and there's the town council.
Correct.
And we're advising the town council.
You're advising all 3
And-
bodies.
Okay. Okay. And so the sooner we get this done, the better
I don't
off we
think
are.
P&Z takes your advice, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But you're advising at least the town council and the board of select.
Okay, well, with that and no more questions, maybe we could move on to poor Russell in the back room that has his hand over his eyes. It's good.
Thank you.
Ray, thank you
you to
so
Ken.
much for
Yeah,
your
and
time.
thank you, Ken and
Thank you,
Ray.
Shiva.
Yes, and
Thank you,
Shiva.
everybody.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Ray.
Very
Okay,
informative.
thanks. Thank you.
Russ, you're at the plate finally.
Hey.
So this is Russ Kimes.
Hello.
He's the Office of Emergency Management. He's our manager. And I talked to Russ, we've all talked to Russ and Phil Shively. I don't know, anything else you want to add for your curriculum vitae before we proceed?
No, recently full-time as emergency management director, which I'm very excited about still, a year into the job, loving it. Took it as a part-time position back in 2020, and then I've been a volunteer with the fire department for almost 25 years now, which is shocking.
Just a kid.
Yeah, I was 18 in high school when I joined. And then I rode with New Canaan EMS for, I guess, 2.5, 3 years. So I also have a little perspective on how that works as well.
And Phil, you're up. You want to say a few words?
Hi, Phil Shibley. Work with Russ as the Deputy Director for Office of Emergency Management, formerly the head of New Canaan Volunteer Ambulance Corps EMS. Was with them until a couple of years ago. So yeah, happy to be here.
Take us out, Russ. What are we doing?
Okay, so I was just asked to get some insight, to provide some insight for this commission about.
Yeah, and some, and if you have, anecdotal stuff, like how do you guys operate? And Phil, how do our emergency responders operate, and to what extent is cell service used in the response?
Sure. And so we actually collected this information. We spoke to all the chiefs of police, fire, and EMS to gather the information. So rather than me attempt to paraphrase, in particular with law enforcement, because I don't have a background in that world, I have prepared remarks from them. And I think what's important to mention is that just like anything, I think we see in any domain, data is becoming more and more important, and having access to data. By its nature, being first responders, a large portion of our data is going to be in the field, right? Where we're out doing our business, whether it's a blue sky day or an inclement weather. That's just the nature of the beast, that we're going to be out in the field accessing it. And as you can imagine, I mean, even in the 25 years I've done this, we have come a very long way with regards to the technology that is employed. There are also certain things that have not changed at all. A fire pump is a fire pump. It moves water. It doesn't require a cell phone connection to operate. But there are certainly other things and advances that have been made that are very important in what we do. So I'll start with what the chief of police provided for me. So they have 4 basic data needs, which currently are the only means that we have currently is cellular data for when you're outside of the building. And I will put a little insight to that, because it was actually an interesting point that was brought up by, I believe, Rich in our discussions, which is, can we log into a Wi-Fi at a place we're at? Hypothetically, if it's unsecured, which is unlikely unless they have a guest one, I would not want to be in a position where someone under duress or working in emergency circumstances had to go into their settings on their phone or their iPad or their device, then try to log in, wait for it to log in, authenticate, and then try to get it. So I just wanted to, that was a very good question to ask. And then also, most residents, you don't find unsecured Wi-Fi. Not that I've gone hunting around and trying from people's driveways. So anyways, for PD, they identified they have 4 basic cellular needs. The first is they have mobile data terminals, which currently rely on cellular connectivity. The MDTs allow officers to run license plate and motor vehicle operator checks through the NCIC, as well as gather real-time information on, for example, wanted persons, stolen vehicles, criminal history. They have a couple of the license plate reader, I believe, as well, that are based on cellular data. So they will get a notification if a tag has a warrant or something like that. The MDTs also allow dispatchers, so the person who's answering 911, who's dispatching them via radio sitting at headquarters, to be able to send information to the officers that would not be suitable to broadcast over our public safety radios. And I'll pause on that because emergency management, we're starting to take over the ownership of the infrastructure for our public safety radio. So our public safety radio, we own as a town of New Canaan. It operates on, for those who want to get technical, VHF 155 megahertz. The police band has P25 digital. All of the other bands, I think Highway has digital, but the rest of them are analog for a number of reasons, and I don't want to get into the tech of it. We use it for voice. It's not used for data. That particular bandwidth is not good for data, but the improvements that were made to it are good, but it is a radio system. So it is you key the microphone, you take up that channel in its entirety until you release the microphone and talk. There is, in this case, where police are talking about information that may not be suitable for broadcast, was also echoed by EMS when we start talking about HIPAA information. Yes.
Just so you understand, anybody who's got a couple $100, go to Uniden, buy a Bearcat and hook it up and you can listen to all the channels in town.
Yes.
So if you, that's why dispatch radio is not used for HIPAA,
whether it's a
motor
alarm
vehicle
codes
stops,
to get in the garage door if a person is down on the ground and we can't get to them. In the case of police, sensitive information about investigations, or people perhaps are doing surveillance on, I mean, you can envision those sorts of things. Our radio system is not encrypted, and that is why they use cellular voice or data in those cases to relay that information.
Is there a reason why it's not encrypted? I'm just curious.
I can't speak for police. I know that AES encryption beyond there's a cost to it, which has gotten lower, I believe, over the years. I don't know the answer insofar as police. They may have one channel, but I don't know empirically. But it's always been that case that that we've had unencrypted voice comms just since the history of it forever. And the other reason that I think it's equally worth mentioning is we only currently have one frequency that is repeated. So if you're out on Valley Road and you key the microphone, it actually bounces off the tower at Silver Hill and then they can hear you at the headquarters. So there's only one channel to talk on for all of the police officers, everything else. We have the ability to talk line of sight a mile with our talk around frequencies. So what I'm getting at here in particular across all three of the agencies is any complicated conversation, any discussion more than basic words, and you've heard radio, you affirmative, negative, this, that, the other thing, you've tied up the frequency from what could be very important information that needs to be relayed over that band, especially if you have a high intensity situation, heaven forbid, an act of violence, a fire, or something like that. Radio discipline, which you may or may not have heard the term, especially from the military, is a very important thing. So cellular becomes, in our case, because we have no other tools, that principal means where we would conduct those conversations. Second, police reports that second police identifies that cellular service allows the public to report emergencies through 911 activations. The majority of 911 calls to New Canaan come from wireless devices. So there, an example he provided me, I don't have the year for it, but we did provide this, I believe, to town council, and I'm happy to provide. It's publicly available on the state of Connecticut website. They have all their 911 statistics, but I believe the most recent year, the total 911 activations was 5,771, of which 3,915 were wireless. So a sizable majority of those calls were done by cellular. I will add my additional aside just to provide some context. A large percentage, and I don't know empirically the number, and I don't think we would ever actually be able to get the answer to this, of people's home phones are now voice over IP phones versus traditional copper lines, the good old, what we call POTS, plain old telephone system, which means that if you have a power outage, and not a generator backup system. And even if you have a generator backup system, if the power is out widespread enough, it will take out Optimum's internet because it requires to have the switches and gear that feed off the power grid itself. You will not have a phone. So then your only fallback position is using a cellular, and that's for the general public, right? Then police identify that their responders rely on cellular networks to communicate with each other and further conduct investigations, as they were saying, at a scene. These communications are often not appropriate for security or confidentiality reasons, or too lengthy to be conducted over two-way radio system. I think I alluded to that before. And then the cell tower locations provide a base for a number of our two-way radio antennas. The cell towers we found, and I agree with the chief here, the cell tower sites where we have our public safety radio are more reliable and consistent with connectivity than the ones we have on private property. It's wonderful that we have a number of sites, including St. Luke's, the country club, that allow us to basically mooch off their power. We give an internet backhaul and site the antenna on top of the building. St. Luke's, it's actually on top of the actual gym itself. But we've had the most trouble with those sites as well, and no fault of their own. Maybe IT switches something out and we find out about it because the panel goes red. Whereas the cell sites that are at a fixed hardened facility like a cellular tower, which has backup generation, we know, tend to be more reliable just in general. EMS uses, yes.
Private cell site.
Yeah.
Technical Power has no generator, and Locust has no generator. So we have cellular sites right now that don't have that.
which is resiliency, which I will love to talk to you all about power and other infrastructure resiliency at some point.
It's just a choice that they don't have a backup generator. Oh, oh, okay.
The 39 is the cell tower site, doesn't have a generator on the Verizon site there. Right. That, yeah, it was a bit of a surprise. I don't remember which storm that was when we realized that that was not working and they didn't have generation there. So EMS uses iPads in vehicles to provide call location, patient information, and updates. However, cell phones are used to contact dispatch for pertinent patient information that for security and confidentiality reasons cannot be broadcast over two-way radio, such as door codes, key locations, patient information. HIPAA is always a concern to EMS, and phones allow us to maintain confidentiality and confidence. Cell phones are also used to connect with emergency department for medical direction. So to split into two conversations. When we're riding in the back of the bus going to Norwalk Hospital, we will patch through over radios to talk to the doctors and let them know.
Bus is slang for ambulance.
Yes, sorry, thank you. The bus is slang for ambulance.
Sorry, I'm just coming back to the generator. Did you consider something like a solar generator in the sense that you just store the battery, it's not noisy, and have we explored that?
So I can't speak to that site because it was a cell towers.
No, but instead of the generator, like literally, if you, I mean, I'm talking about it from experience because I'm doing it on my roof and I can generate something like 40,000 kilowatts. So I don't think the generator, I don't know what's the power which is required.
Yeah, well, actually, keep in mind, those are private sites, the carriers operate them. Town doesn't.
Oh, we don't have any control. So we cannot tell them that it's too noisy, for instance, or.
Depends on the site. So there's two conversations I think going on at once. The one that's Locust is a cellular site, but we have public safety radio repeater sites at various locations in town. I don't want to get into too much detail, and I'm happy to go into executive session if you want to know all the nitty gritty, because we just don't want bad actors to know where they are in the details. However, those that do have generation are predominantly done with an actual diesel generator. I can't speak on a technical level if there's I will say that radio equipment in general is highly fickle to voltage and changes like that. However, as a thought experiment, could you do it and have a large battery system there? Yeah, probably. Very possible.
And is it like, can the town advise with that?
That would be this guy's job.
This guy.
Yes. So we're actually going to be moving the brains of our infrastructure for our first responder radio system to another location. And then key to that is it will have redundant power. It will have security. It will going forward. That's not a question. That is something it will have.
That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
No, 100%. And security is equally important with that as well.
Of course.
So anyway, I was talking about cell phones with emergency department, medical direction. So there's just two parts of this. When you're riding on the ambulance that you can
Yeah, we're
patch
on the
in.
bus. We're with you. Okay.
We're on the bus. Yes, the bus. You can patch in and talk to the doctor, let them know what's coming in. Male 42 XYZ. That is a very short conversation. So they know basically just the very high level. There is also situations where they needed to, an EMT would need to talk directly to a doctor for authorization for medications or certain interventions, medical interventions, which are done over cell.
Intervention.
Right. And then also emergent consultation between ED physicians, paramedics, and EMTs, as well as direct physician to patient consultation. There have been times we hand the cell phone directly to the patient. If we don't have cell phone service, that you can't do that. Additionally, and it's tough to say, termination of care is discussed as well using cell phones. That's not something that's done over radios. Obviously, we're not handing them the microphone to talk about termination of care. Cell phones are used by patients to contact family members, which is especially important for caring for minors. If you have a child involved in, I don't know, a car accident, they're not with their guardians. It's an example. You will definitely see someone hand the cell phone to get in touch with, first to talk to the parent and then to have the child talk to the parent, reassure them, and gather information from the parent about the child and everything else. Amy highlights they continue to experience challenges when transmitting via vehicle radios, but particularly cell phones in certain parts of town, including the Northeast, Valley Road, North Wilton part of town, the Northwest, Lost District, Ponus Ridge, and Dan Highway area. As noted, it's an ongoing conversation. And then moving to fire, and this one I can speak to in depth. The fire department relies on cellular service for mobile data terminals as well. We are transitioning away from having Panasonic Toughbooks for many reasons. We are going to iPads with integrated cell phone service within the iPads themselves. And what that is using is we just switched to a wonderful new system called First Do, which is a cloud-based, web-based. So basically you fire up a web browser and that what contains our dispatch information, incident updates, and in particular our pre-planning information. And what pre-planning means is as you're leaving the building and as you're responding to the building, or if you're out at another call or out training, you hit the cell if you've got signal, and you can pull up where the nearest hydrant is, what the water source is, contact information for the individual. If we have it, building plans and layout, construction information about the building. So it's a big thing that our career staff in particular, beyond the fact that it's good community engagement and learning your district, they go out with these tablets on cellular data and actually conduct not inspections, because it's not like the fire marshal where they're doing a code inspection, gather relevant information. Are there hazardous materials? Are there things we need to be concerned about? How are we going to get people out of a building that we can use as we're en route to the scene, that 5-minute ride? That officer in the front seat is looking at and formulating their plan of attack. We also rely on cell service to talk to homeowners, key holders. I have many times tried to call, in particular, Eversource when I'm sitting with a down power line. Dan's Highway I tried, couldn't get out, and you're stuck because I can't leave the scene because it's a power line, it's down, and I don't want someone to go up and get close to it, which happens regularly. So I couldn't drive away to get cell service because I was in an area where I didn't have it, right? And I wanted to relay more information. I could definitely hit dispatch, right? And I could tell dispatch, contact them, let them know XYZ. But if anything more than that in a conversation, you don't do on a radio.
Do you have a sense of where I should not have an accident?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do. Valley Road, for
So
sure, the northwest end of town.
There is for you have a sort of a map where there's issue that should be addressed.
So here's the thing, I had a background in computer stuff in Morgan Stanley for years. So I am a data guy. I used to build databases. We don't track, and we haven't tracked because it isn't something that's required by NIFR in the federal fire reporting, where we have calls that we didn't have service, or the example I gave you, Dan's Highway, where I was sitting there in the middle of the night with a thunderstorm and I couldn't get out. This is unfortunately just stuff we all know from being in the field and seeing. I don't have empirical data.
Maybe let me rephrase it. Do you think if we get a coverage for Verizon, that would answer the question? Meaning if we see on the Verizon here, there's a donut, like there's nothing. Do you feel that if we use some information like that and they would
100%.
cover all the donut holes?
We would love to know a new drive study, which I'm very excited to hear you're going to do. And with regards in particular for both carriers, because the town and most of our first responders use Verizon currently. That's what their account is with. There is another provider that's out there, which is AT&T, but it's called FirstNet. And I'm personally a big proponent of FirstNet because I've seen it work, which their service, which is AT&T, does preemption for first responders. It's identified and flagged. I work motorsports part-time, just as my fun hobby. And I've been to large venue, 200,000 spectator, and nobody could get out on their phone, get out on their text. And it worked for me because I have a FirstNet.
That was my question, sorry.
So to answer, then you answer the question in a way, if we can get a coverage, that would be very helpful for you, right?
Yeah, I'd love to know. Because what we know is based on just from our own experience. And I can say these are the parts of town and where we know we've had problems. Exactly. It's all anecdotal.
This is my question for you though. So if we know that FirstNet is a better coverage option because you all get preemptive rights to the coverage, why does the town not using? Why
It doesn't fix coverage.
Verizon match FirstNet, they now have preemption.
But the coverage is better. he's
It's
saying,
not
then.
coverage. I think, let me clarify that. It's the signal has to be there. What it does is on an overloaded cell tower, you get to go first.
But
it doesn't make the range any better. It doesn't duplicate,
I
it
get
doesn't
that, but if we
create.
know the town has better coverage on T-Mobile, we says the best coverage in town. Why wouldn't we use T-Mobile for the first responders? And
Our first responders have had their own choice to which ones they use, and EMS rode with both AT&T and Verizon modems in their ambulances. So basically they were saying, roll the dice. I'm hoping I get one of the two. And it seems like based on that, most people have ended up one Verizon just because downtown works better.
How about
at the end of the day.
T-Mobile?
But the periphery, it's not the case that they found. We have not done T-Mobile.
Because if it says the best coverage in town, we've decided.
the best quality service because they have fewer customers.
I thought you said it was the best coverage in town, Les.
Well, they claim it's the best coverage. Yeah.
Oh.
But honestly, I know a handful of people who have T-Mobile.
Okay.
Right?
But you said the relay, they invested and put the relays throughout town,
Relays on the LT player.
right? So.
But that would only be effective in a small geographic. Anyways, I would strongly encourage the group to empirically, let's figure it out. Let's run a test and see what's out there. Because I would like to know what areas in particular we have impairment. And also it would give us real data of which carrier we should be using because it works the best.
And also like address some
Study.
serious
Yeah,
shortcoming,
study.
right? Like,
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
if you see carrier doesn't cover a certain zone, then we could have mini cell tower or whatever technology.
Yep,
to address your
100%.
problem, because I think it's a priority with the great effort and the great work you're doing. We need to help you, right? So.
No, I appreciate that. And Rich and Sven and I were talking as well. I'm conducting an experiment. You know, when I step back and I go, okay, we're very hyper-focused first responders, just a cell phone. I'm agnostic. If we have access to data in the field, great. At the end of the day, the reality is in looking what else is out there, there isn't much. Cell is by far got the most propagation and is the cheapest that's out there. I did some research for Starlink. We actually, for the emergency management, have ordered one Starlink to test it out.
Good.
And also
that's
because I
great.
think it's important for us, especially when we get into the future conversations about resiliency. When you think about the fact that how does fiber and our internet for the town connect into the town? It's limited points, right? And so we have a vulnerability there. So anyways, we're going to get one. We're going to test it out and drive around with it on my car and see if it works, because I have heard the concerns are tree canopy, right? That at the end of the day, you're trying to hit a satellite and trees have a effect on that. But like I said, I want to learn, and I'm very happy to provide. It's not going to be, you know, I hate to say 3 meter squares. It's going to be just empirical, me driving around saying, here's what our general impression is. But
That's great.
the problem though is the cost prohibitive. And I did a little bit of digging here. The rough cost per unit for a cellular data modem, it's $40 a month. You figure any data plan, cellular plan, $350 for the hardware. Call it $800 for the install, right? Starlink is $250 a month, $2,500 for the hardware, and the same $800 install. We say you just have an upfit. So if you just take the Firehouse, say you get 3, and this is just a thought experiment, not something we've ever done. I'm just looking at data agnostically. How do you get it? 1 chief car, and if you just did the first 2 fire apparatus, cellular would be $3,400 for hardware and $1,400 a year of subscription. Starlink is $10,000 for hardware and $9,000 a year in subscription. If you scale it, the economies is this, if you scale it up to like police with 16 patrol cars, now you're going to just the subscription is $7,000 for cell versus $48,000 a year.
Can you
So-
put one on a motorcycle?
Yeah, you have to wear a large hat. So that's where I think over time, perhaps that technology
Get
will
cheaper.
get there and the costs will come down. It's not there. Cellular is right now the only and best option we have for first responders.
Take 5 minutes and talk to me about 800 megahertz.
Oh, okay. So we are also investigating with our public safety radios the possibility
This is a
of,
dispatch radio system.
right, the one we were talking about earlier with police, fire, and EMS. We are seeing our neighboring towns, Wilton, Norwalk, Stanford's already done it, Westport, have moved to, instead of owning their own radios, the brains, everything else, to using the state's infrastructure. They're still contributing. They still have to pay have to have a contract with Motorola to pay their share of maintaining it. But they gain the benefit of, as I alluded to before, we're on what we call VHF. Our radios can't talk to all of our neighbors who are on UHF for 800 megahertz, unless you buy a $10,000 tri-band radio from Motorola. So, the biggest lessons you learn after 9/11, which I think we're still trying to get through, is interoperability in major scenarios, whatever it is, shooting, fire, disaster, terrorism, being able to talk to each other and no town can handle it themselves is a key public safety thing as well. And what Sven is alluding to is we're beginning to kick the tires on, is this something New Canaan should join the wave of getting onto the state system? The downside is you have to buy all new radios because it's a different band at the end of the day. So it's a substantial capital discussion.
Motorola has a solution for every problem. And the problem with Motorola is all those solutions are very expensive.
How much does each radio cost?
If you get a single band one, six-ish, I'm just back of my hand, 656, and then a tri-band is nearly 10 now.
If you want it, one of the times,
It's unbelievable.
when we get the command and communication trailer back
Hmm.
in town again, it was really instructional on the during the 4th of July fireworks up at Waveney to get a walkthrough and look at the amount of communication equipment that's required for a countywide communication system, mobile communication system. It's impressive, but anyway.
Yeah, so it's, I think what I'm waiting, and I had just had a call today with Chief Blanchfield and Wilton, and I was like, so what is the end up going, financially, is this going to save you money? Is it not? And his biggest point was that it's all the benefits of it. You end up spending about the same amount of money with a substantial capital one-time expenditure, but you end up with so many benefits of using the state system. And I don't want to belabor this discussion about that, that it far outweighs it. So we're researching it. It's something we're looking into.
It's something for us to think about
Yeah.
utilities down the road.
Sounds
Not
exciting.
our number one priority,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it should be, it should be on our radar.
And I am very excited to hopefully come back or have individual conversations with you about the rest of resiliency, because that is so core to what emergency management is: power, water, now internet, because every time we have seen that businesses in town lose the internet and they cease functioning, right? Their points of sale,
Cash only.
the analogy I used is nobody has the old credit card swipe machines anymore. Those are gone. So that is a big business continuity thing for our businesses.
Well, you mentioned what just happened with, right?
Yeah.
The
The fiber that was cut. Yeah.
Yeah,
In
and
Norwalk.
it's like for half a day, that was it.
Yeah, our town phones went down, so all of the phones
Yeah.
here. The good news is the 911 system's on a separate system, so
Mhm.
that continued to work. But yeah, it is a very real vulnerability in that there are only a couple of providers and a couple ways it comes into town. And I don't think people realize just how much it is pervaded, become part of their life and existence to have access to the internet, whether it's through cellular or just through their own homes, through Optimum or whoever.
And, do we know, talking about the internet, do we know what portion is handled by the states or the federal entities, in the sense like there is a push to get internet everywhere, right, in the US? So, if there is some grant or help to improve the internet connection.
Well, we're now wired for Optimum LTs has wired the whole town fiber,
Okay.
and Frontier just wired the whole town with fiber
Wow,
for
okay.
single family homes.
Okay. Okay.
So we have the opportunity to improve high-speed internet. But they're the worst marketing companies in the world. We build it and then they can't sell it.
Well, they can't operate it
You
either.
can't operate it either.
Exactly.
I mean, let's be clear here.
And equally important, and one of the things that they will not talk about in open forum for good reason is, at the end of the day, where do the actual connections come into town from? Just like we were talking about power, the main conduit's 123, things like that, where should work with them to identify those vulnerabilities and encourage more connections and pathways. So we have redundancy and resiliency.
Yeah.
And it's the same point we made with cell towers. I hate to say, if we're going to rely on cell as our mobile data solution, you want resiliency. You want more than just one point of service because of the fact you have to have redundancy. I mean, unfortunately, look at the tragedy that happened in Hawaii. 27 cell towers got knocked down just with the wildfires, was what I was hearing in the initial reports. So then suddenly nobody had any voice or cell.
Thanks, Russ.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks so much. Thank you for
very much.
helping.
Yes.
Drag you back anytime we want.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm at your service.
Okay, the next thing we have on the agenda is a discussion on our drive-by study that has come up in every agenda item.
Yes.
We've
It keeps coming back to
revisited
this.
it every time.
What's higher than priority one?
Definitely.
First, I would remind you that, Centerline came in 2014. and did a drive test. The Centerline actually went bankrupt, but the people who did the study we talked to last fall, John Keating, who updated the P and Z Commission on the results of looking at what's changed since they did that
Since,
study. And he said, not that much has changed. Well, obviously, we now have Soundview Lane. So that was a piece of advice we had updated what the 2014 study said. Not much has changed. But you tasked me to go out and try to find alternative proposals to VCOM. I didn't realize Anthony, what's Anthony's name? Lepore from Cityscape. He's now the president of Cityscape. Tom Teslick hired Cityscape to do two things. I didn't know about the second thing. He did the first thing was to have them revise our advise on advising our P&Z regulations to conform with the 1996 Federal Communications Act. And he did that, and that was accomplished. Then in February of 2017, he hired him to Cityscape to be prepared to do site-specific analysis consultation. And that was going to be paid for, to my surprise, not by the town, but by either the carrier or Homeland Towers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I don't know, I haven't confirmed yet whether they actually did the work on Irwin Park and West School at the time. But that was a separate contract. I didn't know until I further.
What year was that?
2017. Anyway, I talked to Anthony. Anthony is the president of the firm. They're based in Florida. They are a consulting firm. I asked him what firms in the Northeast would be competitors of VCOM. He suggested C Squared, which, as Ray said, does a lot of work for AT&T. They have a 5-office firm in the East Coast, and Hampshire is the closest. They're in New Jersey as well. But anyway, I talked to Martin Lavin up in Auburn, New Hampshire, and he said, unfortunately, they're conflicted because they're representing AT&T on the appeal of the 1837 Ponus Ridge Tower. So they felt conflicted as far as doing this. I talked to a fellow in New Jersey recommended by Anthony at Turnkey Wireless, Stan Komsky, and he promised to get me a proposal by yesterday. He actually is working with Amdocs, which is a big, I didn't realize how big they are. They're 25,000 employees.
Oh, wow.
They design and build software, and they're like a Deloitte or a Accenture in terms of being a big technology consulting firm. They're going to make a proposal.
So they
Yeah.
do the drive-by, the Amdex folks?
Yeah,
How do you spell that, Amdex?
Amdoc, AMDOCS, Amdocs. And actually, Stan himself has done a lot of work in New Jersey, in particular, designing wireless, like he did the MetLife Stadium for DOS. He's done a lot of big venues, so he's kind of he actually sounds more like a developer to me but he backs into Amdocs to do the. So that's another possibility.
Mhm.
So we really have.
You didn't talk to anybody from C Squared?
I talked to. They said they can't do it because
Oh, they're the guys who were
because of the
conflicted.
work on
Who
it.
were the two choices we had, you said?
Cityscape.
So those are the two
Oh,
choices.
Amdocs and Cityscape.
Amdocs is going to give us a proposal. Now, keep in mind, or we can go back to Centerline again. Centerline, they came out from Colorado. It's not called Centerline anymore, but John Keating. But when you take somebody from out west, they have to fly their equipment here, pay for hotels. They charge $21,000 for a study that VCOM will do for $12,000. It's not they drive around all the roads in a couple of days.
And they drive around with Verizon and with AT&T and with.
Their equipment picks up all the carrier signals.
Are we able to tell though which one is picking
So,
up where?
so if you look at the Centerline report, which is on the town's website, it's got a very detailed analysis at, they measure it in terms of the quality of the signal they're getting
Yeah, and it's by bandwidth, by
by every band.
bandwidth supplier.
Bandwidth,
supplier.
carrier,
Right.
and signal level,
Right.
location.
So, I would go back to the idea though, the VCOM was recommended, yes, by Homeland Towers, but they happen to be one of the largest vendors, multi-office firm. They made a proposal, and they're prepared to go and do the drive test if we want to select them. But I go back to the notion we had the discussion before. These firms, if you look at the types of clients the VCOM has, counties, New York State, all these municipalities, you know, they don't work just for the carriers. They have no incentive to try to be biased. Actually, I shared with you, they were rather fronted by the criticism Rita Bettino gave about their independence, and they put in emails, you know, look at guys, you know, we've challenged Verizon and AT&T when we have problems with their proposal, you know, there's no reason to view them as not independent.
But
Or
I do like Amdocs because they also do DOS. It seems like they have a wide, it's a huge company. You've got lots of different kind of technology there.
actually VCOM or not VCOM,
Amdocs.
Turnkey wireless.
Stan is with he does DOS systems indoors and outdoors. So but you know, and keep in mind, DOS is something the Utilities Commission before and P&Z, I remember Dan Radman saying, why can't we do DOS? Well, it's gonna be $12 million. Who's gonna pay the $12 million?
Well, it's a lot more than. $12
And then,
million.
but more importantly, Crown Castle, when they did their
Yeah.
advice in 2010, they said, it won't work with all these leafy towns. Small signals from a lot of small cells don't go very far with leaves. You know, so radio waves don't propagate well through buildings or through leaves. So it's just a fact of life that Wellesley, Massachusetts, which owns their own electric utility, they put a it's also kind of relatively flat topography in Wellesley, but they put a 30 node system in to enhance their cell service. They own the system, but it costs a few $1 million to build. Again, the carriers are in the business of serving the maximum number of customers they can with the money they're willing to spend for a particular location.
Have you talked to Darien about what they're doing? They've been having discussions because Mansfield doesn't have, they've got whole areas that don't have coverage too, away from 95. And I know they were having discussions about what to do in
Darien, well,
Darien.
first of all, Darien benefits greatly from our Waveney water tank, right? It doesn't
But they have
extend.
areas that they don't have coverage.
Sure, just like Riverside and Coscob and Greenwich. I mean, you know.
Well, what should we do about the drive-by study?
I say
We
that
gotta
we,
get going.
I
Yeah.
think we need to.
I say that we approve at least two members
Yeah.
of this commission to talk to the first selectman and make a decision for all of us to just go forward so that we don't have to have a special meeting.
Are we gonna have a discussion about with the other carriers, just to talk to Cityscape as well as Amdocs as two members?
Cityscape does not do
know-
drive tests.
sorry.
They do consulting. And Amdocs, I welcome the proposal.
They're gonna get us their quote.
Yeah, they're gonna give us a quote.
Okay, so we'll have the
I think
quote,
we ought to
okay.
get the
Yeah.
quote from
Yeah.
Amdocs,
Yeah.
if nobody
I
else.
wanna make sure
So
we
you
get the
got-
quote, it'll be
We got Amdocs.
We
Yeah.
need to do this.
Right, but we gotta do it.
I'd like to make this decision by the time the Board of Selectmen meets again on September 5th, and then
Then do it.
have the people do it in September.
Right.
We'll have the results. a
Oh,
couple
you all
weeks.
share, whoever the two people share with us what the thought process is or what the thought.
That's
is.
fine. I mean, I'll
I'll
take the lead and Jill will work with you to, once you
Sure,
get the
okay.
proposals.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
vet
Look at the
them
contract
and
sections.
share our, you know,
Anybody else?
thoughts. You said.
We're gonna
I
be
just
okay.
want to
No,
have,
but we'll check,
Just
we'll
want to say
we'll
we wanna-
definitely,
As like
the data piece, I will.
Sure you're
definitely-
vaccinated.
The data section.
I think we do have to ask.
But
because
I
it's my only
guarantee you, with a
concern.
third-party vendor, we're gonna get access to
Yeah.
the data. We own the data. We're
Yeah,
we're paying for it.
that's why I don't.
That's
think
what
it
makes sure
would
they
be
give
an
it to
issue.
us.
No.
Because there's one thing that we can complement with the study is that, you know, when they do the analysis, the coverage, it's more like a 2D map.
Mhm.
Meaning you have something very subtle, but very important. Is like, imagine if I have a tower, right? The tower will not reach behind this
We understand.
shelf, right?
Will there be
So
blind
I think
spots?
what I will try to provide is what we need for the first responder is even a more, because they have a very fine grain, at least a few meters. So we could show that where there's area that are, no matter how many tower you put, it's not going to be solved.
It's not gonna be solved.
So in that context, maybe we can go back to Verizon and say, please put us some thing on the electrical.
Yeah. And the drive test should pick up though.
Yeah,
Where the
absolutely.
Where the
Well, yeah.
Verizon study does, oh, it's the
that's
big
right.
umbrella, the drive test should pick. up.
Verizon
Because
and
it seems like
AT&T.
we're going to kill two birds with one stone, right? Like we
Right.
want the
Yes.
first
Yeah.
responder to have the
That'll
best.
be a great base.
Karim will have a chance, to look at the raw, right?
Yeah, I'll see if you can
And
ride
give
around the
us,
car.
you know,
with them
and
if you
give us
want.
a quality and, if we
You
don't
drive around the
succeed the
car.
first time, we do it again. But I'll make, okay, so I'll make the
Okay.
motion that Krista and Jill will work with the first selectman to finalize the contract ASAP.
And I'll work with Russ as well. Russ will be part of
And
it.
Russell,
But they're gonna share with us what what you're
Yes.
finding, what
Yes.
what you're asking for the RFP. Okay.
Yeah,
that's the motion.
that's your motion. I can't
Discussion?
second it.
Oh, yeah, do
Oh,
we need
yeah.
a second?
Are we discussing? Do we need, no, I think we agree.
Janae, will you second it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you second that?
Janae seconds.
And then discussion, any discussion, any more discussion about it?
No, I just want to be clear that when we do the contract, we know what we're getting, what we're asking the data, and what we're asking them to do exactly. That's
Yeah,
all.
the one thing I would mention, it was alluded to before, if we want to try to simulate coverage from the 1837
Right.
Upper
Right.
Ponus Ridge,
Oh, with the crane.
that
yes,
requires some more money and putting a crane up
Yeah.
and,
We gotta raise
We
a
don't- we don't have
transmitter.
a Budget, Kevin.
well, you know, I, we find money.
Your budget.
I like that.
Checking,
We just
check
spend that.
$12,000 is easy. I mean, the crane. can get
Okay, we need
expensive.
to vote on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
All opposed? None? Okay.
No
unanimous.
abstain.
So,
Right.
excuse me, this is Idan Cantu, just for the record, I'm on and I
Oh,
vote yay as well.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
so we don't see your picture, Harm,
Yeah.
so we didn't know who,
Yeah, we apologize.
all we've got
No.
is a picture of Kevin's back.
Did
I
you,
understand.
did you vote for that or did you vote against it?
I voted for that.
Okay.
Great.
Any
Right,
comments
yeah.
you'd like to add on that?
No, I've followed this last part of the discussion. And that all makes sense. And obviously the expediency is important.
Terrific. Okay. Is that it on that one? Kevin, do you need anything more on
I'm
that?
all set. I'll work.
Okay, terrific,
Thank you, Kevin.
terrific. I'm still interested, when you talk to Cityscape, would they do and take a look at the network design for the town that includes
Oh,
all
sure.
the
Yeah,
technologies?
we could retain them again.
Yeah,
they
that's what I'm
they were
wondering.
never paid. We didn't pay them.
We didn't pay them. They might have done some work.
Ray's gonna see if he paid them for Irvin Park and Center School.
Because they sound like the
Center
only,
School,
the only people anybody has suggested that is independent is technologically independent.
Well, they specialize in representing municipalities.
Right.
So
They do, and they advertise being technologically independent they're not a the tower builder, they're not a technology guy.
they're also a small firm
They are a small firm. That's right. And he
and almost a virtual firm. He's based in Washington
Yeah.
DC. They're based in.
I don't know how
Florida.
many people you get that would enter into the same kind of study that he would do. Because I asked him the question. He said, I don't know anybody else that does what I do.
Hmm.
Right. I do 3 pieces to it and nobody else does all 3 pieces.
Okay.
And so it's interesting. If we want to look at the question, Janae, that
Yeah.
you have and that I have is, let's talk about the whole network. Let's
That's
not
what I
just
want
talk
to
about
understand the whole
towers and
picture.
Actually,
And then we talk about.
Rich, you
the
might also
5G.
mention Tom Teslick.
Oh, that's a good point.
Do you want to talk about Tom?
Yeah, sure. Sure. We had a discussion with Tom Teslick and we invited him actually to come talk to us and he didn't want to. He said he's volunteered enough and he no longer lives in New Canaan.
Oh,
He
he's
lives
living in
down
Canada.
south,
Oh,
but
I
He lives,
didn't know that.
he lives in
Fairness.
Charlotte. He lives in Charlotte. He's glad to be a consultant for us.
If we pay him.
And and I asked him for a proposal. He gave me a proposal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he did, and I'll share it with you individually if you'd like.
Okay.
And he might be somebody we'd want to go back and talk to. I mean, he's a skilled man.
He has a lot of history for
He's got
this.
a lot of history for it, and he might be valuable to pay as a consultant. But well, I'm not sure exactly what to say because he said he spent a lot of time coming together, pulling stuff together. He really believes in what we've looked at right now, the FAQ, if you remember the FAQ, the strategy that Kevin laid out. He really believes the cell strategy and the tower strategy is the right one for us. If we want to get a base of coverage off which we can work. And that was what he really believed.
He's also a first responder. He worked for the ambulance.
Yeah.
Volunteered for the ambulance.
Yeah.
He was very dedicated to that. I mean, that was what motivated him to be on the utility commission, I think.
Yeah.
Right. But he was very pleasant and he was,
He's a good guy.
he's
He's a
very,
very smart man.
exactly.
Thank Kevin and adjourn.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, thank you very much. Or do you have anything you want to bring up?
No, but are you gonna deal with the other attorneys not here for water?
Oh, yeah, let's deal with, I did ask all of the leaders here to make a comment on where they're going and their first thoughts on what they do. Do you want to take that off, Kristen?
For cell service, let's call it, I think in the last meeting, we had identified Jill and Janae and myself to, spearhead projects, or I should just say data gathering, initiatives, which I think is really the key way to operate in the first 6 months. One of the things that we were thinking about was to reach out to other towns. For example, you were saying, oh, what has Darien done, lately?
Yeah, I know some people in town council. I was thinking we could reach out to the Westport Town Council, Darien Town Council, Greenwich Town Council, because Greenwich has a horrible problems in North Greenwich. They've discussed this and had this discussion. Darien's had this discussion. Like, what are they doing
great.
and how are they solving it?
That'd be good. That'd be really good.
So
That'd be good, great input.
yeah,
that'd be
so
interesting.
we will identify, the usual suspects, locally to reach out to, and we'll figure out who's going to do what. And then the other parallel path project was to research alternate technologies, but now I feel like once we've addressed some of it, we're starting to touch upon, pie in the sky things like Starlink, but, put some things in action.
So we have a list.
Yeah, and then DOS is another thing, so maybe we can research a little bit Wellesley and how they did that and what worked and whatnot. And it's not to say that any of these technologies will ultimately be appropriate, or even feasible for New Canaan, but, and that's kind of an open invitation to anyone who has access to other ideas, that we should definitely, it's a longer term strategy, but I think that's one thing we should be doing in parallel path with what we're executing now.
I think there is also what Jenna mentioned is like in a way, independent of the technology that we're using, this analysis, this study will help us to get a sense of a more precise coverage of the of New Canaan. Yeah, our needs, right?
Identifying our needs.
So that's another, it's kind of separate in the sense that it will back up, for instance, if we need more cell tower and the biggest one, the macro or the micro, because there's I think we should be a little bit flexible in the sense that we could do a hybrid mixture, because the question is like, what are we trying to solve? And I think it's, if I understood properly, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's just making sure that our respondent have the highest quality of the system, right? So I think independent.
And our residents. So
And our
in
residents.
their
Okay, so you're
backyard,
right. Okay.
They have a heart attack in their backyard, they can
Sure.
go to 911.
That's right.
Well, I'm
So
more worried,
I
I'm
think-
also worried about your landscaper cutting off his leg with a chainsaw. And what does he do? You know?
So,
Oh,
So-
Don't do it on my.
but-
yeah, no.
But I think what might be what we're going to extract, and it's as a side project with this analysis, is knowing where there is some real problem. right?
Exactly.
And then you can address it with different solution at different costs, right?
There was one thing I was looking at in terms of thinking about other technologies and what's coming and what's fast, and Verizon does their thing and all of these people do them. And so what I am going to try to do is on two fronts, just in terms of some of my clients have, analysts who are telecom analysts and they're investing. So I may try to just talk to them just on where they see the industry going. And then quite randomly, just in spam email, I got an email 2 days ago from a company that does expert witness testimony in telecom. So they have all kinds of people that just testify on this stuff. So I was going to reach out to them to just see if there's somebody that'd be, just so we have some idea of so as we do this and we're doing a tower, we should know what's coming 5 years from now, 10 years from now too.
And what does happen to the tower when it becomes obsolete? Because it will become obsolete. Like, whose responsibility is it to dismantle
Well,
and take it down?
And does it,
That
well,
kind of-
yes, but then is any of this new technology gonna use a tower with different stuff on it? Like all that stuff I just figured, I'm trying to find a place that has a little more one-stop shopping on all of that. And so those were my thoughts somewhere.
And I think that that's
at.
great, it's like the evolving technology bucket, if you will, and we should all, I say that to all the commissioners, if something, sparks an interest or you come across an interesting thought, that you want to share, we can include that. on the agenda.
I think the technology thing and figuring out the combination of the technology, what I learned tonight that I didn't understand before is nobody really cares about the other technology.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Ray really didn't care about the
Yeah.
5G ain't gonna happen because Ray was here.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
And
it's-
it's gonna happen because Verizon becomes interested in our population
Mhm.
and the business opportunities they have within New Canaan. Because they're gonna pay for it and they're gonna put it
Yeah.
in, right? And they're gonna have to find some poles or someplace else. Maybe we can help them do that, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, you know, Ray's been helping us for 6 or 8 years. He's looked at around New Canaan extensively.
But if,
He's talked to hundreds of residents, you know, around these areas.
Mhm.
Around New Lane first, because you have to go to the siting council and say, who else did you talk to?
sure.
And he has to send letters to them and get responses to prove that he's, you know, scoured the area to find someone else.
if your solution though is a nail, then you're gonna always want to use a hammer, like, I mean, I do think we need to see what.
Yeah,
those
no, it-
options are.
It'd be hard for us to find any company that's gonna come in and say, we will do an bus system for you,
Mhm.
right? Because no one believes it works very well. And
That was correct,
therefore no
Council.
one will spend the money.
Well, you're right, but I think that question is a question that you have to keep asking because the technologies keep changing. Right? I mean, if you go back to satellite for a minute, satellite phones used to be this long, right?
Yeah.
And now satellite phones can be this long. It's because the antenna technology changed.
Yeah.
Right? And it became very creative. And so I think you have to keep asking that. And I think there's risk. I think there will probably always be towers and towers work very well. So I don't think there's a big risk in towers.
At least for you in my lifetime.
Yeah, but I think having them pay for it and pay us a lease is a good idea, because when it gets supplanted by something else, it's their tower.
The trade-off is that we are giving up town land, like we can't use that
Well-
land for other things, right? I mean,
That's right.
so
That's right. But it's not that's a pretty small cost given where it is.
it depends, I
Right?
guess it depends on where.
I
yeah.
think the risk reward there is good. I mean, we haven't really considered, and I don't think we really need to. We haven't considered, should we build the tower?
Mhm.
Right? Because we could build the tower and then we would have much more control over it,
Yikes.
right? As
Seriously.
opposed to,
about that
Just
liability
make
and
closest to
everything
me.
else.
But when we
I
say
think there's a
control,
lot
I
of,
still feel like there are limited spots in town that are ideal locations geographically, and I think that's actually the bigger challenge than who's gonna build the tower. And I think even if we were building a tower, we'd still be talking about the same handful of locations, right? Move it here or there for a little setback or to make someone happy, but
But they're like they're still saying they probably need a tower in town too. So then we still have that elephant in the room. Well, where in town are we gonna put a tower if we do the west tower? And then where on the east side are we gonna do a tower? Like, I
Well,
just we need to come
yeah.
up with an overall strategy for this.
Well, I mean, the overall
what we're
strategy
here
is
for.
we want comprehensive service as best possible in all corners of New Canaan.
Right.
And you're not gonna build that that's not all gonna just pop up one night, like the 5 magical locations. So it is going to be a process.
It's iterative. There's not one location that solves all those problems, so.
But there might
we're
be some that
solving-
solve more of them, right?
Right.
Mhm.
But, and I think that's why they're so dedicated to the West School one is because it
They
does
think it's
solve
the
the
best
best
location.
location.
That's the
for all
best
of
one
them.
for Verizon. That's not the best one for the town. The best one for the town would be closer to the center of town.
Well,
No.
Yes, that is, when you look at the coverage maps, if you moved it, shifted it, more of New Canaan would be covered by it.
But there's no site
It would
that's
still
there.
be on the 47 acres.
Let's
Oh.
go, let's look at the coverage maps and then
Okay, have that discussion.
rather than,
I think there's gonna be a lot more opportunities that come up because I think that if we had the coverage maps and you found areas where the neighbors might be willing to say,
Yeah.
you know what, we'd like to buy
Mhm.
we would like to buy a small lot, a small thing here.
Yeah.
Right? And we'll take care of it.
Mhm.
Right? And I think there's opportunities for that elsewhere as well, within the utilities, and in the town so far, we've done it that way. I mean, some of us are on city water, some of us aren't, some of us are on city sewers, we're not. And so the residents are kind of used to paying for what they get. And if you move into a 4-acre place today, you're not gonna get cell service.
Yeah.
You might have to buy sets or something in order to get the cell service. And I think it will be helpful if we can just motivate people understanding what is available for their problem.
before I
May
leave
I ask
tonight,
it-
can I ask you a question, Karim?
Yeah, sure.
What do you think about satellite?
Well, it's,
Well, I mean, we're talking about constellations and, and stuff like that.
I
Where
so
are we?
before answering this question, I would need to see the coverage. because with the coverage, I will get a better sense with the satellite. I think satellite should not be discounted as a backup plan for sure. Because imagine in the town, like the satellite, unless you shoot it down and you need to shoot a lot of satellite in Starlink, you will still have the internet at the speed of the fiber. So let's say that in our town, if we don't have, for whatever access generator or things, we don't have it, we'll still not be deprived of the internet. So I think even if it's expensive, in certain situation, it could be a backup plan.
Yeah.
So I'm more in the idea of doing a mixture of different solutions, because that will give resiliency. So that need to be analyzed, right? So I'm just taking without knowing the real situation, but that's what we'll gain also with this analysis. So I think we know that we're going to do it. Thank you. But it will get a lot of answers, right?
We will.
Okay.
We will. I'd just like to comment on when Russ was talking about the expense for satellite, that's expense for that a municipality would have to pay, not what you would have to pay at your house.
That's right. It's way lower. It's like
way
100
lower.
bucks. Yeah.
It's way lower. And you know,
But
I was in the satellite business and we went bankrupt, so I understand how this can go badly, believe me. But there are some changes that have happened. It's the low Earth orbit versus high Earth orbit makes a huge difference. The latency was very hard to deal with. And the quite frankly, the plans that Elon Musk has, he plans on putting all of these guys out of business, you know.
Yeah, and look at
Within 5 years, he's saying.
no. If you look at Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Ukraine is working and they do everything which is military communication, international, just on the Starlink.
they've also been clear cut.
Well, that's true.
Which is terrible to say, but like I've looked at
No, but
satellite too. I mean, precisely, yeah, that one of the problems again we get to is.
But to be
is-
clear, cell towers are the same problem. I mean, very trees, topography, depth, so you have to come up with other solutions just to make
Yeah.
up for some of that too.
Yeah,
Well, I think we need to move forward and
Yeah,
try it. I
yeah,
mean, quite frankly, one of my goals this week was to buy a Starlink and take it back up to Maine with me and see if it works.
How'd that go?
Huh? Haven't bought it yet. I gotta buy it tomorrow. I had to come here.
It's all talk anyway.
I am all done. I am. all done.
No, I'm kidding.
But I think it's great that we need to try some of this stuff and see if we can make it work. And there's different things that will work in different areas, I think. And I think it's just would be fair for the residents to understand, if you're gonna live in a 4-acre area, you're gonna not have the same service, or it's gonna
And-
cost you more to
Yeah,
have
my
the
parents live in a
service.
ranch in Texas. They have to accept the fact it's not great.
Right.
Let's just another side question and I'll stop. Like, for instance, as a result, we will get this study. Do we intend to publish that so everybody can see it, or?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
everything's public.
All right, perfect.
Any last thoughts from Hiram?
Transparency,
Yeah,
everything is
We
public.
don't have anything from Hiram, you weren't gonna talk about anything, right?
No, not in particular. The only thing I would add is that, you know, in terms of sort of the reviewing on the regulated utility side, which I know is not necessarily the first priority, and given the limited options available as being we receive services from a regulated monopoly. I thought, and I sort of just put it a framework, sort of just a sort of a basic, maybe it's, just a basic information on what services provided, what the alternative technologies are, the various different measures and that are that are involved with utilities, and it almost becomes sort of a working document, a little bit of a fact sheet. And so that at least when we ask ourselves, or when the residents ask about, well, what else can we do? What can be done? That we have these sort of facts, at our hand and that are constantly updated. So it's more of a long-term project, but it's something which I think can and should be done, and that the town should have it. It's town and it's the various, selectmen or whatever should have at their fingertips that can be constantly updated, and it's a good information. So that's just something I wanted to add based on the conversations we had at the last meeting.
Also, just thinking out of the box, so I don't know if it's okay or not. I'm just asking, would it be okay, for instance, to open, let's say on the website, to collect the opinion of the user, saying literally based on a certain identification, saying, are you happy or not with your?
Well, we talked about doing a survey.
but it would be more like voluntary, yeah.
An
a form.
online forum.
Ongoing,
Yeah, ongoing, so
ongoing.
you would get a fresher pulse on, is it important for?
I'd like to publish the coverage maps first
Sure, okay, yeah.
before we,
Yeah,
because otherwise it just turns into speculation again.
That's
and,
right. That's
You know,
right.
and the value of that is
Mhm,
That's
de
good to hear.
minimis.
mhm.
But thank you for thinking out of the box. That's why you're here.
Good.
Do you wanna talk about just measuring across the different utilities and across the towns, et cetera?
Yeah, so I would like also another out of the box, sorry. It seems like for the different project in the utility, there is two things, right? Is what can we do as a city, what you can do as a selectman? And also what is the economical potential of doing something? So, for instance, that's what our colleague was doing and was mentioning. He has done a sort of a cost analysis, meaning to address this problem of making sure that everybody will communicate, it will cost me X amount of dollar per VHF or any type of thing. So I think what I'm trying to say is that in general, there's a concept in business which is called KPI, which is, can we put a value, a measure on what we're trying to address, right? And one would be to be transparent and to say, look, yes, it's expensive, but we're trying to address this goal to make sure that you're safe. And that costs X amount of dollar. And we made this decision versus another one. But that should be done systematically for each project that we touch. And I'm more than happy to do the data.
I like that a lot.
All right.
Just another leader that is not here tonight is Mike Collins. And he said he would take on working with Eversource. And so he works with Eversource. He does municipal projects. He's working on a Georgia project tonight, which is why he's not here, because the guy we're running it had to meet him. But the thing they're working on right now is really resilience, a project for resilience, and it deals with burying wires in New Canaan. And this was based, and Kevin, you know about this. It was based at burying wires.
Burying the wires.
Burying wires. And the person that's worked on this for a couple of years is a guy named Rick Corkin, who was on the television earlier. And he became interested in doing this in his neighborhood. And he personally organized his neighbors and himself to get rid of their utility poles. And he negotiated with all of the utilities that were on it, the cable guys as well as Eversource, and got a deal with them all. Dealt with the contractors to dig the trenches, take the posts out, and the electricians to put it in and put the services into the house. And the reason this is to me quite interesting is he did this for $16,000 a house.
Wow.
Which to me was pretty cheap. Now it was on a very simple residential road. It was not on South Avenue or on 123 or anything like that. But it kind of proved the concept, because when somebody said $16,000, well, geez, that's not that much more than putting in natural gas, you know. And I think people would love to get some wires buried. So I've been talking to him, and Mike has been talking to him, and Rita Bettino has been part of this as well. And I know they've met with you, Kevin, right? I mean, Rick did.
Toy Farms has underground wires.
Right, yeah, but it's built it was put in when it was built.
That's a rather large experiment, right?
It is, but it was
So
put in,
power goes out,
it was
and
put
you
in when it
power
was built.
farms, it's the last to go back online. 'cause they
I'm
can't
sure
convert
that's
it to
true.
others.
But I'm just telling you so Mike is working on this, right? And it is really just it says the following thing to me. Everybody always has said it costs too much to bury our wires, don't bother. And I don't think we as a utility commission should accept that. I think we should, I think time makes a big difference. It doesn't matter whether we bury our wires in the next 20 years along the way. and it doesn't cost us that much, and some of our residents do themselves, right, because they want it done. And I think there's several different ways to break it up, and I think that applies to cellular phones as well. I don't think we have to do everything today. I think we need to do the stuff today we can do and that we can do well, and work it together as we go on. I'm not convinced that small cells are too expensive until we understand better, and maybe it's not too expensive 5 years from now. And I like this. The thing that's interesting is the new thing that's interesting is Rita and Rick met with a developer down in Darien that has worked with Eversource and convinced Eversource to bury the wires for his development on Eversource's ticket. And I don't remember the guy's name, but Mike knows him as well. And so this is gonna give us some more ideas on things that are actually working and working with the utilities. And I think that's a great thing. And Mike's working on that and knows all the people that have been working on it.
And my street has buried wires. It's
Mhm.
very nice.
Yeah,
We don't have any
I'm
wires,
kind of
really.
excited about it.
I already told you my horror story with Simsbury. I had to be off.
Right.
I'd pay that 16,000. So.
And then for Bernie Clark, what he would say if he didn't have COVID was he would say he volunteered to go talk to Aquarian. And so he's been doing some research on what's going on in town with that, and you could probably tell us better than he could tell us right
Don't
now.
start with Tiger Band because Tiger deals with Aquarian all the time.
Right. But we're gonna have considerable work going on in town by Aquarian, right? Putting in new mains, et cetera.
They've been here for a long time.
They have, but it's gonna be pretty noticeable, I think, where they're going.
That's a big main.
The one they're putting in now is a big main. The
That's a
one-
big main.
The one that went down Harrison, any of you noticed, I stopped and talked to those guys one time. It's buried 12 feet down, which is why it's taken so long. So it's a big deal. So I would like in our meetings to have just a minute like this for people to share what's going on that they've been working on and you know, doing some studies. on. So
Great
that was
idea.
why I put that at the end. If everybody agrees with that, I will just keep doing that.
Great, it's a great format.
Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
Sven.
Second.
Sven and
All in
Janae.
favor?
Yeah.
Seconds.
Yeah.
Hiram?
All in favor? Kevin, thank you very